fall asleep to the entire story of the Silk Road, the ancient highway that connected the world. The road that never truly existed. Tonight, before sleep quietly finds you, imagine standing beneath a sky so clear that every star seems close enough to touch. There are no engines humming in the distance. No glowing cities stretching across the horizon. Only the whisper of cold wind brushing over endless sand, carrying grains that have been wandering these deserts for thousands of years. The moon hangs above the dunes like an old lantern. Somewhere far away, a camel lets out a long, grumbling complaint that sounds as though it has personally grown tired of history itself. Which, to be fair, would be understandable. Camels have witnessed humanity making questionable decisions for a remarkably long time. In the darkness, a tiny line of lights appears. Not torches held by soldiers marching toward battle. Not pilgrims searching for a holy shrine. Merchants. Slowly. Patiently. Almost impossibly far from home. Their caravan moves one careful step at a time across the great emptiness. Silk wrapped inside waterproof leather. Bundles of cinnamon. Jars filled with fragrant oils. Papers so precious that some kings have never even touched a single sheet. Glass bowls from Roman workshops. Jewels from India. Gold coins bearing faces of emperors whose names no one here can pronounce. A young boy walks beside the last camel. It is his first journey. He has never seen mountains taller than clouds. Never crossed a desert where travelers disappear without leaving footprints. Never heard 20 different languages spoken around one evening fire. His father tells him something every caravan leader eventually learns. The road belongs to no one. The boy looks ahead. There is no road. Only darkness. Only sand. Only mountains waiting somewhere beyond tomorrow. And yet, for nearly 2,000 years, millions of people somehow found their way across these impossible landscapes. This is the story of how the ancient world became connected, not by one empire, nor by one king, nor by one invention, but by thousands upon thousands of ordinary people willing to keep walking. Historians call it the Silk Road. Although that name is actually a little misleading. There was never a single Silk Road. No carefully paved highway stretching from China to Rome. No giant sign reading, "Next Oasis, 147 miles." No helpful camel repair station every 50 miles. Instead, it was a sprawling web of trails, rivers, mountain paths, caravan tracks, coastal routes, and dangerous shortcuts that stretched over 4,000 miles across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Some paths vanished beneath shifting sand within weeks. Others remained in use for centuries. Entire cities rose because one caravan stopped for water. Entire kingdoms disappeared because another caravan chose a different route. The Silk Road was less like a road, and more like a living organism. It breathed. It changed. It adapted. Sometimes it flourished. Sometimes it nearly died. Yet somehow it always found another way forward. If you could fly above Asia 2,000 years ago, you would not see a neat line cutting across continents. You would see threads. Thousands of tiny moving threads. Camel caravans crossing deserts. Horse riders racing across endless grasslands. Ships sailing the Indian Ocean. Yak caravans climbing snowy mountain passes. Donkey trains creeping through rocky valleys. Each carrying something. Not just goods. Ideas. Stories. Languages. Religions. Diseases. Dreams. Sometimes even entire civilizations. A single merchant might unknowingly transport an invention that would transform another continent hundreds of years later. A monk carrying sacred writings could change the spiritual future of millions. A sailor might accidentally introduce a new fruit into lands where no one had ever imagined its taste. Even fleas. Especially fleas. would eventually change history forever. We'll get to them later. Unfortunately. Because history occasionally enjoys reminding humanity that every wonderful network can also become an express delivery service for catastrophe. But for now, the world still feels enormous, mysterious, separated. Imagine the map as ancient people understood it. To a farmer living beside the Yellow River in China, Rome might as well exist on another planet. To a shepherd wandering the hills of Greece, China was almost mythical. People had heard rumors. Strange stories passed from trader to trader. There were whispers of lands where silk grew on trees. It didn't. There were tales of rivers filled with gold. Usually exaggerated. There were kingdoms where people supposedly had blue eyes, red hair, or skin darker than polished walnut. Most listeners simply nodded politely. Travelers always exaggerated. Because after surviving 6 months in the desert, you're almost obligated to improve your story a little. Otherwise, what was all the suffering for? Yet behind every impossible tale was usually one tiny piece of truth. Somewhere beyond the next mountain, there really was another city. Beyond that city, another kingdom. Beyond that, another language, another emperor, another market, another horizon. One step at a time, humanity slowly stitched the continents together. Curiously, silk itself was not the most important thing traveling these routes. It simply became the symbol. Silk fascinated everyone. Imagine touching it for the very first time. Soft beyond belief. Cool against your fingertips. Almost floating in your hands. To Roman nobles, silk seemed magical. Some senators even complained that wearing silk made men look too luxurious. Ancient politicians criticizing fashion. Some traditions truly never disappear. The Romans spent astonishing fortunes buying silk from lands they barely understood. The funny part? Most Romans had absolutely no idea where silk came from. Others imagined mysterious forests where shimmering fabric somehow grew naturally on branches. The Chinese, meanwhile, were perfectly happy allowing everyone else to remain confused. Keeping trade secrets has always been excellent business. Especially when your customers willingly invent even stranger explanations than reality. The actual process, tiny silkworms spinning delicate cocoons, was guarded more carefully than many military secrets. For centuries, revealing how silk was made could carry the death penalty. Imagine risking execution over caterpillars. History has a wonderful sense of priorities. Yet silk was only one tiny thread woven into something much larger. Along these routes traveled jade from western China, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, pepper from India, frankincense from Arabia, silver from Persia, glass from Syria, ivory from Africa, amber from the Baltic Sea, furs from Siberia, horses from Central Asia, books, music, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, even recipes. Somewhere, countless years ago, a merchant probably convinced another traveler to taste a strange new spice. Perhaps he sneezed immediately. Perhaps he loved it. Either way, dinner changed forever. Entire cuisines slowly evolved because strangers met beside campfires. It is easy to imagine history being shaped only by kings, by generals, by massive armies clashing beneath banners. Those stories are dramatic. But the Silk Road reminds us that history is just as often changed by someone trying to sell cloth, or carry tea, or transport paper, or simply survive another journey across one more mountain. Perhaps that is why the Silk Road feels so human. It was never truly controlled. Empires taxed it. Bandits attacked it. Kings protected parts of it. But no ruler ever owned the entire network. The desert ignored politics. Mountains cared little for emperors. Snow buried everyone equally. A caravan leaving China might pass through dozens of different kingdoms before reaching the Mediterranean. Every border required new negotiations, new taxes, new dangers, new opportunities. Sometimes officials welcomed traders with feasts. Sometimes they welcomed them with prison. Travel remained unpredictable. One oasis might offer fresh water, music, and laughter. The next might be abandoned, its wells poisoned by war or swallowed by drifting sand. Nothing about the Silk Road was guaranteed. Not profit. Not safety. Not tomorrow. Perhaps that uncertainty made every successful arrival feel miraculous. Imagine entering a bustling market after 6 months of travel. The smell reaches you first. Fresh bread. Roasted lamb. Incense. Smoke. Perfume. Animals. Sweat. Thousands of unfamiliar scents mixing into one unforgettable memory. Then the sounds. Children laughing. Metal striking metal. Merchants shouting prices. Musicians playing instruments you've never seen. Camels groaning. Horses snorting. Dozens of languages overlapping until conversation becomes something resembling music. You cannot understand most of it. Neither can anyone else. And somehow, trade still happens. A smile. A gesture. A handful of coins. A shared meal. Commerce has always possessed its own universal language. The Silk Road succeeded not because everyone trusted each other. Quite the opposite. Many didn't. Merchants bargained fiercely. Kings schemed constantly. Bandits waited patiently. Spies blended into caravans. Religious disagreements occasionally exploded into violence. And still, people kept traveling. Because curiosity is often stronger than fear. Profit certainly helps. But curiosity may be humanity's oldest engine. Someone always wanted to know what lay beyond the next horizon. Someone always believed there might be something extraordinary waiting just a little farther west. Or east. Or south. Or north. The road rewarded such people. Sometimes. Other times it rewarded vultures. The Silk Road could be astonishingly cruel. Travelers died from thirst. Blizzards. Avalanches. Sandstorms. Disease. Robbers. Political revolutions. Simple bad luck. Entire caravans occasionally vanished. No trace. Only whispers carried by later travelers. Don't take the northern pass. We heard the wells have dried. Bandits were seen near the gorge. The mountain spirits are angry. Usually the mountain spirits turned out to be hungry wolves. Or tax collectors. Sometimes it was difficult to tell which was worse. Yet despite every danger, the caravans returned. Again. And again. Generation after generation. Like tides crossing continents instead of oceans. Each journey quietly changing the world. No one traveler witnessed the entire network. No merchant walked from China all the way to Rome carrying the same cargo. Goods moved in stages. One trader sold silk to another. That trader carried it farther west. Then another purchased it. Like an enormous relay race stretching across Eurasia. The silk itself traveled farther than most human beings ever would. Perhaps that is fitting. Objects often become better travelers than people. As our journey begins, we must leave behind the familiar cities of later centuries. Before bustling caravanserais. Before famous merchants. Before Marco Polo. before Mongol horsemen thundered across Asia, before Rome became obsessed with Eastern luxuries. We must return to a quieter world. A world where the Silk Road does not yet exist. Where China still looks west with uncertainty. Where the deserts remain barriers rather than bridges. Where one remarkable explorer is about to disappear into the unknown. His name is Zhang Qian. He has no idea that his footsteps will help open one of history's greatest highways. And so, as the desert wind settles, as the stars slowly wheel overhead, and the caravan disappears beyond another silent dune, our story finally begins. Before the Silk Road, when the world was still in pieces. Long before anyone imagined a network of caravans stretching across continents. Before silk became the obsession of Roman aristocrats. Before Buddhist monks carried sacred scrolls through frozen mountain passes. And before merchants learned exactly how much water a camel could survive without. Which, incidentally, was always less than they hoped. The world was a collection of separate stories. Each civilization believed itself to be somewhere near the center of everything. And honestly, who could blame them? When your entire life unfolds within the same river valley, the same mountains, or the same coastline, the horizon feels like the edge of reality itself. Beyond it? Well, almost anything seemed possible. Perhaps there were kingdoms made entirely of gold. Perhaps giants lived beyond the deserts. Perhaps dragons guarded the mountains. Perhaps there was simply more desert. History repeatedly proves that the last answer is usually correct. Yet people have always preferred dragons. Nearly 3,000 years ago, if you stood on a hill overlooking northern China just before sunrise, you would see a landscape unlike anywhere else on Earth. The Yellow River wound across the plains like a ribbon of muddy bronze, carrying enormous amounts of fertile soil from the distant mountains. Every spring, it nourished the fields. Every few years, it flooded catastrophically and reminded everyone that nature had absolutely no interest in human schedules. Villages clung to its banks. Farmers rose before dawn. Oxen pulled wooden plows through soft earth. Smoke drifted lazily upward from clay houses. Children chased chickens through narrow paths while elderly grandparents watched from shaded courtyards, quietly pretending they weren't supervising every single decision. Life followed familiar rhythms. Plant. Harvest. Repair. Celebrate. Endure winter. Begin again. These farming communities depended upon order. Order meant survival. A broken irrigation canal could ruin an entire harvest. One unexpected drought could send thousands searching desperately for food. A single season of poor weather could erase years of prosperity. Perhaps this constant struggle encouraged something remarkable. The Chinese states gradually became masters of organization. Officials counted grain. Engineers redirected rivers. Generals measured distances. Scholars recorded nearly everything they observed. Kings learned that controlling water often mattered far more than winning battles. You could conquer your neighbor. But if the river flooded, both kingdoms suffered equally. Far to the west, however, another world unfolded beneath entirely different skies. The endless grasslands of Central Asia stretched farther than the eye could follow. No rivers defined borders here. No walls enclosed villages. The horizon itself seemed alive. Wind bent the tall grass into shimmering waves that rolled endlessly beneath blue skies. Horse herds thundered across open plains. Nomadic families packed their homes onto wagons. Children learned to ride almost before they learned to walk. A horse was not merely transportation. It was freedom. Food. Status. Protection. Family. Imagine being 6 years old and already galloping across open steppe faster than many adults today drive through city traffic. That was simply normal life. The people of the grasslands measured wealth differently. Farmers counted fields. Nomads counted horses, and horses had one tremendous advantage over farmland. When trouble appeared, they could leave. Entire communities packed everything they owned within hours. Round felt tents disappeared almost magically. Campfires faded. The grass slowly straightened. By sunrise, it looked as though no one had ever lived there. Invading armies frequently arrived to discover nothing. Rather frustrating, really. Meanwhile, beyond towering mountain ranges, another civilization flourished. Persia. If China excelled at administration, Persia excelled at connection. Long before the Silk Road reached its greatest glory, Persian kings had already understood something extraordinary. Roads create power. An empire is not held together merely by armies. It survives because messages arrive quickly. Taxes reach the treasury. Merchants feel safe enough to keep traveling. Under the great Persian kings, thousands of miles of roads linked distant provinces. Royal messengers galloped from station to station, changing horses with astonishing efficiency. The Greek historian Herodotus famously admired these riders. Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor darkness prevented them from completing their journeys. Human determination has always been impressive. So has human bureaucracy. Somewhere, an ancient official undoubtedly insisted paperwork be completed before changing horses. Farther west still, another civilization slowly expanded around the Mediterranean. Rome. At first, it was simply one city among many. Bustling. Ambitious. Occasionally argumentative. Actually, very frequently argumentative. Romans possessed a remarkable ability to disagree loudly while simultaneously building one of history's greatest empires. Road after road spread outward from the city. Stone highways crossed valleys. Bridges leaped across rivers. Legions marched. Merchants followed. Where Roman roads appeared, trade soon flourished. The Romans built roads primarily for armies. Merchants simply appreciated the convenience. Much later, silk from distant China would eventually travel along some of these very roads. Though no Roman engineer constructing them could possibly imagine cloth woven by tiny insects arriving from nearly 5,000 miles away. History often connects people who never realize they're cooperating. Across the Indian subcontinent, yet another story unfolded. Great cities flourished beside rivers. Markets overflowed with spices. Temples echoed with chanting. Scholars debated philosophy beneath shaded trees. Merchants crossed jungles, rivers, and mountains carrying pepper, cotton, precious stones, sugar, perfumes, and ideas. India occupied a remarkable position. It stood between worlds. Goods arrived from Southeast Asia. Others traveled north toward Central Asia. Still more moved west toward Persia and beyond. Indian sailors learned to understand the seasonal rhythm of the monsoon winds. Twice each year, enormous air currents shifted direction across the Indian Ocean. To someone unfamiliar with them, the monsoon might appear chaotic. Experienced sailors saw something different. A timetable. If you departed at precisely the right moment, the wind itself carried your ship across thousands of miles. Missed the season? Well, you might be waiting several months. The weather, as always, remained humanity's most stubborn travel agent. Each civilization developed according to its own geography. Mountains protected some. Rivers enriched others. Deserts isolated many. Oceans opened opportunities while creating entirely new dangers. People adapted to whatever landscapes surrounded them. Yet geography also built invisible walls. The Himalayas towered higher than imagination. Crossing them required extraordinary courage. Or perhaps extraordinary optimism. Neither guaranteed success. The Taklamakan Desert stretched across western China like a sea made entirely of sand. Its name is often translated as something resembling, "You go in, you don't come out." Ancient tourism advertisements were refreshingly honest. Temperatures soared above 100 degrees during summer. Winter nights plunged far below freezing. Sandstorms erased trails within minutes. Water vanished. Direction disappeared. Travelers learned quickly that surviving the desert required respecting it. Ignoring nature has always produced disappointing results. North of the desert lay immense grasslands filled with horse-riding nomads. South rose mountain ranges sharp enough to scrape the clouds themselves. These barriers separated civilizations more effectively than any wall. Not because crossing them was impossible, but because crossing them demanded enormous effort. Imagine planning a journey lasting over a year. No maps worthy of the name. No weather forecasts. No guarantee roads even existed. Every mountain pass might be blocked. Every kingdom might suddenly declare war. Bandits might appear tomorrow. Disease might arrive next week. Your camel might simply decide it had absolutely enough of your company. Camels possess surprisingly firm opinions. Despite all this, people still traveled. Just not very far. Most trade happened between neighbors. Village to village. Kingdom to kingdom. Rarely farther. Goods slowly moved outward like ripples spreading across a pond. One merchant sold jade to another. That merchant carried it farther west. Someone else purchased it. Years later, perhaps decades later, the stone finally reached lands where no one remembered its original source. Even before the Silk Road officially existed, tiny fragments of long-distance trade already connected distant peoples. Archaeologists sometimes uncover objects that seem strangely out of place. Chinese silk buried in Egyptian tombs. Roman glass discovered in China. Indian spices reaching distant markets. Tiny clues. Little whispers from history. Evidence that adventurous individuals occasionally crossed astonishing distances even before formal trade networks emerged. Most people, however, remained wonderfully unaware of the wider world. A Chinese farmer likely knew nothing about Rome. A Roman blacksmith had never heard of the Han emperors. An Indian monk probably imagined Central Asia only through stories shared by travelers. Knowledge traveled much more slowly than curiosity. Rumors filled the empty spaces. To the Chinese, mysterious horsemen roamed endless western grasslands. To Mediterranean civilizations, distant eastern kingdoms became almost mythical. Some believed people there lived for hundreds of years. Others insisted enormous birds carried elephants through the sky. Travelers have always been creative storytellers, especially after enough wine. Still, every exaggerated tale contained a grain of truth. Yes, there really were magnificent horses in Central Asia. Yes, there really were cities larger than anything some visitors had ever imagined. Yes, there really were fabrics softer than clouds. Reality often seemed unbelievable enough. The difficulty lay in reaching it. At this point in history, no emperor ruled enough territory to create continuous trade between East and West. Too many kingdoms stood in between. Too many mountains. Too many deserts. Too many languages. Imagine buying bread using 6 different currencies before lunchtime. Trade became complicated very quickly. Every border introduced uncertainty. Different laws. Different taxes. Different rulers. Different customs. One kingdom welcomed strangers. The next imprisoned them. Success depended upon flexibility. And luck. Quite a lot of luck. Back in China, however, events were beginning to unfold that would change everything. A new dynasty rose to power. The Han Dynasty. Strong. Organized. Confident. Its emperors dreamed not merely of protecting China but expanding its influence beyond the familiar horizons. There was only one problem. Actually, several thousand mounted problems. To the north roamed powerful nomadic confederations collectively known as the Xiongnu. Their horsemen struck swiftly. Villages burned. Livestock disappeared. Then they vanished back into the vast grasslands before Chinese armies could catch them. Fighting mounted archers on open steppe proved remarkably frustrating. Imagine trying to chase the wind while wearing heavy armor. The Han emperors soon realized something uncomfortable. China needed allies. Powerful allies. Somewhere beyond the western mountains, rumors spoke of another people who hated the Xiongnu almost as much as the Chinese did. If those rumors proved true, history itself might change. Someone would have to find them. Someone would need to cross deserts no Chinese envoy had ever successfully explored. Someone willing to ride into lands where maps ended and uncertainty began. It was, naturally, an extraordinarily dangerous assignment. Perfect for history. Because history rarely asks ordinary people to remain comfortable. Soon, one young imperial official would receive an order that seemed almost impossible. Travel west. Find these distant allies. Return if you can. He could not know that his journey would eventually open pathways connecting civilizations from the Pacific Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea. His name was Zhang Qian. And before he ever reached the lands he sought, he would first become a prisoner. Sometimes the greatest journeys begin with spectacularly bad luck. And under the endless blue skies of the Central Asian steppe, that bad luck was already galloping toward him. Zhang Qian, the man who walked beyond the edge of the map. There are moments in history that seem almost invisible at first. No grand trumpet announces them. No army gathers beneath fluttering banners. No poet immediately recognizes that the world is quietly changing. Instead, one ordinary person receives an impossible assignment. And years later, historians realize that everything after that moment unfolded differently because someone chose to keep walking. Around 138 BC, inside the orderly halls of the Han imperial court, Emperor Wu faced a problem that refused to disappear. Every year, reports arrived from the northern frontier. The Xiongnu had raided another settlement. Another convoy had vanished. Another herd of horses had been stolen beneath the cover of dawn. Farmers abandoned fields. Soldiers rode themselves exhausted chasing enemies who seemed to dissolve into the endless grasslands. The emperor understood something many rulers struggled to accept. Strength alone was not enough. China possessed disciplined armies, engineers, granaries, cities, an organized government capable of counting nearly every sack of grain produced across vast provinces. The Xiongnu possessed something different. Mobility. They rode where they wished. They attacked unexpectedly. And they disappeared before anyone could force them into a conventional battle. Imagine trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. That was the emperor's dilemma. So he turned to diplomacy. Rumors had reached the capital of another nomadic people known as the Yuezhi. Years earlier, the Xiongnu had defeated them, driving them far to the west. The emperor imagined that the Yuezhi still burned with resentment. Perhaps they would welcome an alliance. Together, they might trap the Xiongnu between two powerful enemies. It sounded reasonable. History enjoys making reasonable plans extraordinarily complicated. Someone had to find these distant people. No one knew precisely where they had settled. Only vague reports drifted eastward from merchants and wandering travelers. Beyond the mountains. Past the deserts. Farther west. Ancient directions were often wonderfully imprecise. If your navigation system today announced, "Continue west for approximately several thousand miles until something interesting happens," you might reasonably request a refund. Yet this was essentially the assignment. The emperor selected a young court official named Zhang Qian. We know frustratingly little about his early life. History has a habit of preserving emperors while quietly misplacing everyone else's childhood. Perhaps Zhang had dreamed of adventure. Perhaps he had hoped for a comfortable administrative career involving paperwork and predictable meals. Instead, destiny handed him a horse and a direction: west. He assembled a small delegation: interpreters, servants, guides, soldiers, pack animals loaded with supplies, imperial gifts carefully wrapped for rulers they had never met. Silk, gold, fine textiles, objects designed to demonstrate the wealth and sophistication of the Han Empire. Diplomacy has always involved arriving with presents, usually expensive ones. The caravan departed the familiar lands of northern China. Behind them lay cultivated fields, busy towns, stone roads, government officials. Ahead stretched uncertainty. The farther west they traveled, the quieter the world became. Villages grew smaller. Roads faded into dusty trails. Mountains slowly rose along the horizon like enormous blue walls. The air itself seemed different. Drier. Sharper. Filled with unfamiliar scents carried by distant winds. The travelers entered regions few Chinese officials had ever seen. Grasslands rolled endlessly beneath bright skies. Nomadic camps appeared and disappeared with astonishing speed. Smoke rose from felt tents. Children rode small horses with effortless confidence. Dogs barked at strangers approaching from the east. Everything felt unfamiliar. Different languages. Different clothing. Different customs. Every evening required new negotiations. Permission to camp. Permission to buy food. Permission simply to continue traveling. For a while, everything went surprisingly well. History, however, has an excellent sense of timing. Because somewhere beyond another stretch of open grassland, mounted riders appeared on the horizon. At first they looked like tiny dark specks moving through shimmering heat. Then came the thunder. Hundreds of hooves striking dry earth. Dust billowing behind them. Sunlight flashing from bronze weapons. The Xiongnu. The very people Zhang Qian had hoped to outmaneuver. There was no dramatic escape. No heroic last stand. His small diplomatic mission never stood a chance. They were surrounded, captured, disarmed. The journey had barely begun. Imagine explaining this to the emperor later. "Good news, Your Majesty. We headed west exactly as ordered. And we immediately became prisoners." Not exactly the report anyone hopes to deliver. Yet, Shang's greatest achievement was not avoiding disaster. It was surviving it. The Xiongnu recognized that he represented the Han court. They understood his mission could threaten their own security. Allowing him to continue west was unthinkable. So they kept him. Not for days. Not for weeks. For years. Nearly 10 years. 10 years. Long enough for children in China to become adults. Long enough for forests to grow noticeably taller. Long enough for an ambitious young official to wonder whether he would ever see home again. Life among the Xiongnu differed dramatically from anything Zhang had known. These were people shaped by movement. Their wealth grazed across open plains. Their homes could be packed within hours. Their armies required no permanent fortresses because the landscape itself became their defense. He watched horsemen practicing archery while galloping at astonishing speed. Young riders could release arrows with deadly accuracy without slowing their mounts. European knights centuries later would admire cavalry. The Xiongnu had already mastered it. He observed families dismantling entire camps before sunrise. felt tents folded neatly, belongings loaded onto wagons, animals gathered efficiently. Within an hour, only flattened grass remained. To settled farmers accustomed to permanent villages, the sight must have seemed almost magical, or deeply unsettling. Perhaps both. According to later Chinese accounts, Zhang was even given a wife during his captivity. Whether intended as kindness, political strategy, or simply a practical arrangement remains uncertain. History rarely preserves emotional details. Did he eventually care for his new family? Did they care for him? Did he spend lonely evenings staring eastward beneath unfamiliar stars, wondering whether anyone back home still remembered his name? We cannot know. But we do know one remarkable fact. He never abandoned his mission. 10 years is a long time to hold on to hope. Most people would have accepted their new life. Many would have concluded the emperor surely believed them dead. Some might even have forgotten why they had set out in the first place. Not Zhang Qian. Somewhere beneath years of captivity, his original purpose remained alive. Waiting. Patiently. Like an ember hidden beneath ashes. Then, one day, opportunity arrived. The historical records never explain every detail. Perhaps security became less strict. Perhaps guards grew careless. Perhaps fortune simply smiled for a brief moment. Whatever happened, Zhang escaped. Not alone. His wife accompanied him. So did at least one loyal servant. They fled westward before anyone realized they were gone. Freedom, however, did not suddenly make life easier. Now they faced another challenge. The journey itself. Ahead stretched deserts capable of swallowing entire caravans. Towering mountains whose snow never melted. Kingdoms whose rulers owed no loyalty to China. Languages no one in the delegation fully understood. Yet compared with 10 years of imprisonment, every mile west probably felt like breathing again. As they traveled farther into Central Asia, Zhang entered lands unlike anything described in Chinese geography. He found prosperous oasis cities surrounded by orchards and vineyards. Imagine that sight after weeks crossing dry wilderness. Green trees, running water, fields alive with crops, markets crowded with merchants from distant lands. These oasis kingdoms survived because of geography. Water flowed from nearby mountains into fertile valleys. Travelers crossing vast deserts depended upon these settlements. Without them, long-distance trade would have been almost impossible. Each oasis became a tiny world. Different rulers, different languages, different currencies, different traditions. Yet all shared one understanding. Travelers brought wealth. Protect them. Feed them. Sell to them. Then send them onward. Somewhere, innkeepers throughout history are smiling in agreement. Zhang encountered fruits unknown in China. Grapes climbing wooden trellises. Alfalfa nourishing magnificent horses. New farming techniques. New customs. New ways of organizing cities. Every observation filled his mind. He was no longer merely searching for allies. He had become a witness to an entirely different world. Eventually, after years of hardship, he finally located the Yuezhi. Success. At last. Almost. There was just one small problem. Actually, a rather significant one. The Yuezhi no longer wanted revenge. Years earlier they had been driven west by the Xiongnu. Since then, they had settled in rich new lands. Their fields were fertile. Their livestock flourished. Trade prospered. Children had grown up never knowing the old homeland. Life was comfortable. The desire for vengeance had faded. When Zhang proposed a military alliance against the Xiongnu, the Yuezhi listened politely. Then they declined. Imagine crossing half a continent, spending 10 years as a prisoner, escaping across deserts, only to hear, "Thank you for visiting, but we're actually quite happy here." Diplomatic missions can be brutally disappointing. From a military perspective, Zhang had failed. No alliance, no grand coalition, no decisive strategy against China's greatest enemy. Many officials might have viewed the expedition as a disaster. History disagreed. Because Zhang noticed something far more important than politics. He realized the Western world was interconnected. Kingdom after kingdom traded with one another. Goods flowed across astonishing distances. Powerful horses existed beyond China's borders. Exotic crops flourished. Merchants traveled continuously between distant cities. There were opportunities here far greater than a military alliance. China had spent centuries looking inward. Now, for the first time, someone returned with detailed knowledge of the lands beyond the western mountains. The edge of the map had moved. Not because geography changed, because understanding did. With notebooks filled with observations, memories crowded by unfamiliar faces, and stories almost impossible to believe, Zhang Qian finally turned east. The journey home would prove nearly as dangerous as the journey out. The deserts still waited. The mountains remained unforgiving. And somewhere across the endless grasslands, the Xiongnu were still watching. The journey home, when one traveler changed an empire. The road back to China did not become kinder simply because Zhang Qian had finally accomplished part of his mission. History rarely rewards perseverance with an easy return trip. If anything, it often seems to say, "Congratulations. Now do it all again." So Zhang Qian gathered what remained of his little expedition. The delegation that had once left the Han capital with banners, imperial gifts, and quiet confidence was now a much smaller, much older collection of survivors. Their clothes had been repaired countless times. Leather boots had been stitched together with whatever thread could be found. Faces carried lines that had not existed a decade earlier. The young official who had crossed the frontier had become something else entirely. Not merely older. Wiser. He had seen worlds that almost no one in China even knew existed. He had learned that mountains did not end civilization. They merely separated one civilization from another. Every sunrise now pushed them farther east. Behind them lay fertile valleys filled with vineyards. Ahead waited deserts large enough to humble every traveler. One by one, the green landscapes disappeared. The grass became thinner. The air grew drier. Water became more valuable than silver. The caravan approached one of the most intimidating places on earth. The Taklamakan Desert. Even today, satellite photographs show an ocean of sand stretching across western China. Imagine removing every road, every highway, every telephone tower, every village. Leave only dunes, wind, silence, and distance. The desert measures roughly 1,000 kilometers from east to west. Its dunes can rise hundreds of feet high. Temperatures swing violently between scorching afternoons and freezing nights. Rain almost never falls. To ancient travelers, it was less a place than an obstacle created by nature itself. There was a saying whispered among caravan leaders. If you hear someone calling your name in the desert, do not answer. Some believed evil spirits wanted the dunes. Others spoke of ghosts leading travelers away from the caravan. Modern science offers a less supernatural explanation. Wind. The desert wind does remarkable things. It whistles through narrow valleys. It echoes across shifting dunes. It carries sounds astonishing distances before twisting them into something almost human. A traveler exhausted by heat and dehydration can begin hearing voices where none exist. The desert becomes a master storyteller. Unfortunately, its stories often end badly. That is why experienced caravan leaders followed one simple rule: never travel alone. Ever. A single person disappearing behind a dune could vanish forever. The sand had no interest in returning what it borrowed. The safest routes avoided the heart of the desert altogether. Instead, caravans moved around its northern and southern edges. Here, rivers descending from distant mountains created narrow ribbons of life. Tiny oasis towns appeared like emerald islands surrounded by endless waves of gold. Without these settlements, the Silk Road would never have existed. No camel, no matter how stubborn, and camels are impressively stubborn, could cross the entire desert without water. Each oasis became a heartbeat keeping the trade routes alive. As Zhang traveled, he observed them carefully. Every settlement possessed its own character. Some welcomed strangers with lively markets where traders haggled over silk, spices, horses, and jade from sunrise until long after sunset. Others remained cautious. Their gates closed before dark. Watchmen studied every newcomer from high walls. Bandits had taught these communities not to trust too easily. Trust, after all, could become expensive. One evening, perhaps after another exhausting day's march, Zhang likely sat beside a campfire beneath a sky overflowing with stars. Out here, far from cities, the heavens seemed impossibly bright. The Milky Way stretched overhead like another ancient road. A celestial silk road. Silent. Endless. Connecting one horizon to another. The fire crackled softly. Camels groaned in complaint as they settled onto folded legs. Somewhere nearby, a horse stamped impatiently at the cold sand. Travelers shared dried meat, flatbread, and precious water. Conversation drifted from one language to another. A Persian merchant described cities farther west. A Sogdian trader boasted that he knew every oasis from Samarkand to Dunhuang. An Indian traveler spoke of great rivers flowing toward tropical seas. Nobody around the fire had seen the entire world. But together, their stories began to assemble something remarkably close. Perhaps that is the true beginning of globalization. Not governments. Not empires. Campfires. The exchange of stories. The quiet realization that humanity was much larger than anyone had imagined. Eventually the mountains rose once more. Jagged. Snow-covered. Magnificent. The passes through the Tian Shan and Pamir ranges demanded extraordinary courage. Some climbed above 4,000 meters. At those heights, breathing itself became work. The air grew thin. Snow blinded travelers beneath brilliant sunshine. Narrow trails clung desperately to cliff faces. One frightened camel slipping on loose rock could send precious cargo tumbling hundreds of feet into icy ravines. Sometimes the mountain decided one sacrifice was enough. Sometimes it demanded more. Avalanches thundered without warning. Storms appeared almost instantly. What had been a clear blue morning could become a blizzard before midday. Ancient travelers often described these mountains with a mixture of admiration and terror. Beautiful, but never friendly. Yet even here, life found a way. Tiny villages clung to sheltered valleys. Shepherds guided flocks across impossible slopes. Children who had never seen the sea laughed beneath peaks that touched the clouds. Human beings possess an astonishing talent for making homes in places that seem determined to reject them. After crossing the mountains, Zhang entered familiar territory once more. The landscapes slowly began resembling the western frontier of Han China. The languages sounded recognizable. Government outposts reappeared. Imperial banners fluttered in the wind. For the first time in over a decade, he truly felt he was coming home. Then history played one final joke. The Xiongnu captured him. Again. One imagines Zhang taking a very deep breath. After everything. Really? Ancient historians record the event almost matter-of-factly. But it is difficult not to imagine the sheer frustration. Years spent imprisoned. Years escaping. Thousands of miles traveled. Nearly reaching home. Only to encounter the same enemy once more. Fortunately, fate proved kinder this time. The Xiongnu ruler soon died. Political turmoil followed. During the confusion, Zhang and his remaining companions escaped yet again. It was an extraordinary stroke of luck. History often turns upon such moments. An unexpected death. A distracted guard. A single unlocked gate. Tiny accidents creating enormous consequences. Finally, around 126 BC, Zhang Qian entered the Han capital. He had been gone for approximately 13 years. Imagine returning home after 13 years. Children you once knew were now adults. Friends had grown older. Some had died. New officials occupied familiar buildings. The emperor himself had changed. Yet Zhang carried something no one else possessed. Knowledge. When Emperor Wu summoned him to court, Zhang did not arrive with victorious armies. He brought something far more valuable. Information. He described lands beyond the western mountains. He spoke of prosperous kingdoms producing magnificent horses. He explained that Central Asia was filled with wealthy cities eager for trade. He described grapes, alfalfa, foreign coins, different governments, new military tactics, entire civilizations unknown to most Chinese officials. The court listened in amazement. Some stories must have sounded unbelievable. Cities where unfamiliar languages filled crowded marketplaces. Powerful horses unlike any bred in China. Kingdoms that stretched across fertile valleys beyond deserts once thought impassable. For centuries, Western Asia had been little more than rumor. Now it possessed names, distances, peoples, products, routes. The emperor immediately understood the possibilities. The military alliance with the Yuezhi had failed. That mattered less now. A far greater opportunity had revealed itself. Trade. China possessed silk unlike anything produced elsewhere. The Western kingdoms possessed horses the Han desperately needed to strengthen their cavalry. Both sides wanted something. That simple truth has built more peaceful relationships than speeches ever have. Soon, additional expeditions followed Shang's path. Not one. Not two. Dozens. Then hundreds. Imperial envoys traveled west carrying gifts and letters. Foreign merchants cautiously began moving east. Small trade exchanges gradually expanded. Each successful journey encouraged another. Maps improved. Dangerous passes became better understood. Reliable wells were recorded. Friendly rulers identified. Unfriendly rulers remembered as well. Caravan routes slowly solidified. Not because anyone officially built them, because thousands of travelers collectively learned which paths offered the greatest chance of survival. That is how the Silk Road truly emerged. Not with one grand opening ceremony. No emperor stood beside a ribbon waiting to cut it. Instead, one caravan followed another, then another, until dusty footprints became familiar tracks. Tracks became established routes. Routes became history. Within only a few decades, silk from China began appearing farther west than ever before. At the same time, extraordinary horses arrived in China. These animals became famous as the heavenly horses of Fergana. Chinese chroniclers described them almost reverently. Powerful. Fast. Endless endurance. Legends even claimed they sweated blood. In reality, a harmless skin parasite probably caused streaks of red beneath their coats. Reality occasionally struggles to compete with good marketing. Still, the horses were magnificent. Emperor Wu wanted them badly enough to wage military campaigns to secure reliable access. Because while silk made emperors wealthy, horses kept them alive. Trade along the western routes accelerated year after year. Merchants carried increasingly diverse cargo. Silk remained the most famous export, but wagons and camels now transported lacquerware, iron tools, bronze mirrors, paper prototypes, spices, jade, precious stones, perfumes, glassware, ivory, and countless other goods. More importantly, ideas traveled with every caravan. Languages mixed. Religions quietly crossed frontiers. Art styles blended. Music changed. Even clothing evolved as fashions borrowed inspiration from distant cultures. No one realized it at the time. But humanity had begun weaving together two halves of the known world. The Silk Road was no longer merely a possibility. It had become a living network. Still fragile. Still dangerous. Still incomplete. But alive. And as more merchants ventured into the unknown, another remarkable group would soon become the true masters of these roads. Not emperors. Not generals. Not even explorers. Merchants. Ordinary men and women whose fortunes depended upon surviving deserts, bargaining in unfamiliar languages, and trusting strangers just enough to keep moving west. Because the Silk Road, despite its grand reputation, was never really built by kings. It was built one bargain, one campfire, and one camel at a time. The caravan, the slow pulse of the Silk Road. If you had stood beside one of the great caravan routes sometime during the 1st century BC, perhaps on a rocky hill overlooking an oasis somewhere near Dunhuang, you would have noticed something curious. Nothing happened quickly. There were no charging armies, no racing chariots, no dramatic speeches echoing across the valley. Only a line of animals moving so slowly that, at first glance, they hardly seemed to move at all. A caravan rarely hurried. It couldn't. The Silk Road punished impatience with remarkable efficiency. Those who rushed often arrived nowhere. Those who paced themselves usually reached the next oasis. Eventually, the first thing you would probably hear is not voices. It is bells. Tiny bronze bells hanging from leather harnesses. Soft. Gentle. Almost hypnotic. Clink. 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 The sound carries surprisingly far through the morning air. Long before travelers appear over the horizon, their bells announce their arrival. Even today, some remote mountain communities still recognize the distinctive rhythm of pack animals long before they become visible. It is one of humanity's oldest travel sounds. As the caravan draws closer, individual shapes slowly emerge from shimmering heat. Camels. Dozens of them. Sometimes hundreds. Moving with that wonderfully awkward gait that somehow appears both graceful and completely annoyed at the same time. Camels have mastered the art of looking personally offended by existence. Every step seems accompanied by the silent complaint. I cannot believe you've asked me to carry this again. And yet, they keep walking. Without them, the Silk Road would never have existed. Historians often celebrate emperors, generals, explorers. But perhaps history owes an apology to camels. These extraordinary animals quietly connected civilizations while asking for remarkably little in return. Water. Food. Occasionally a chance to glare judgmentally at their owners. The two-humped Bactrian camel became the undisputed champion of Central Asia. Unlike its one-humped Arabian cousin, the Bactrian possessed thick woolly fur that protected it against freezing winters. Because many people imagine deserts as permanently hot. The Silk Road teaches otherwise. Summer afternoons might scorch the earth. Winter nights could freeze water solid. Temperatures sometimes swung nearly 100 degrees between seasons. The camels endured both. They crossed blazing sand, climbed icy mountain passes, walked through dust storms that blinded men and animals alike. Each could carry nearly 400 pounds of cargo. Silk, tea, porcelain, spices, glass, books, sometimes even frightened chickens. Somewhere in history, a very confused chicken almost certainly crossed the Pamir Mountains. The caravan itself resembled a small traveling village. At its head rode the caravan master. His position carried enormous responsibility. He decided when to leave camp, where to stop, which routes remained safe, when storms demanded shelter, how much water each animal could spare. One poor decision might kill everyone. No pressure. Most caravan leaders earn their authority through experience rather than wealth. Gray hair often inspired greater confidence than expensive clothing. Anyone could purchase camels. Few possessed enough wisdom to keep 50 travelers alive across the desert. The oldest guides became legends. They knew hidden wells invisible beneath drifting sand, recognized stars used for navigation, remembered dangerous valleys where bandits preferred to hide, understood which mountain passes stayed open longest before winter snow sealed them shut. Their knowledge existed mostly inside memory. Maps helped. Experience saved lives. Behind the caravan master came merchants. Some wealthy, some barely surviving. Their fortunes literally walked beside them. Imagine spending your entire life's savings on bolts of silk, hoping someone 2,000 miles away might pay twice as much. If the caravan succeeded, you became rich. If robbers attacked, or drought dried the wells, or war closed the roads, everything disappeared. Modern investors occasionally describe financial markets as stressful. Ancient merchants might have smiled politely, then pointed toward the Taklamakan desert. Among the merchants traveled interpreters, perhaps the least appreciated people on the Silk Road. Imagine speaking Chinese in the morning, Sogdian before lunch, Persian during the afternoon, a little Greek by evening, then attempting to negotiate camel prices in another language entirely. Translation required more than vocabulary. It demanded cultural understanding. One careless phrase might insult a king. Another could accidentally double your taxes. The best interpreters became indispensable. Sometimes they quietly prevented wars without anyone realizing it. Near the center of the caravan walked guards. Not enough to defeat an army. Only enough to convince ordinary thieves that easier opportunities probably existed elsewhere. Most bandits preferred simple mathematics. Attack heavily guarded caravans? Or rob the smaller group 3 valleys away? Practical criminals generally chose convenience. Still, weapons remained close at hand. Spears, bows, short swords, crossbows in Chinese caravans. No one wanted violence. Everyone prepared for it. Then there were the ordinary workers. Camel drivers, cooks, stable hands, blacksmiths, animal healers, servants, laborers, teenage apprentices hoping to learn the trade. History rarely records their names. Yet they formed the true heartbeat of every expedition. Someone had to repair broken saddles. Someone had to cook dinner. Someone had to wake before dawn and gather wandering animals before the caravan departed. History often belongs to anonymous hands. Life followed an almost unchanging rhythm. Long before sunrise, the camp slowly awakened. The stars still glittered overhead. The eastern horizon showed only the faintest hint of gray. Someone stirred the fire back to life. Dry twigs cracked softly. Tiny sparks floated upward into darkness. The smell of smoke drifted through sleeping tents. One by one, travelers emerged wrapped in heavy cloaks against the bitter morning cold. Deserts surprise people this way. Heat arrives later. Before sunrise, many mornings felt almost painfully cold. Breakfast remained simple. Flatbread, dried fruit, nuts. Perhaps goat cheese if supplies remained fresh. Tea where available. Water always carefully measured. Every sip mattered. Meanwhile, the camels received attention first. Animals always came before comfort. Their packs required checking. Leather straps tightened. Cargo balanced carefully. A load leaning too heavily toward one side could injure the animal or spill valuable goods halfway through the day. Experienced handlers inspected every knot. A careless rope might cost a fortune. Then came the slow, almost comical process of persuading camels to stand. Anyone who has never watched a loaded camel rise has missed one of history's great performances. Front legs. Pause. Back legs. Another pause. A suspicious look toward the human responsible. Finally, standing. Usually. Sometimes with considerable protest. The bells began ringing again. The caravan stretched into a long winding line. One by one, they departed. Walking. Always walking. Most caravans covered only 15 to 20 miles in a day. Not because people were lazy. Because survival required moderation. Animals needed rest. Water remained limited. Roads often barely deserved the name. Mountain trails twisted endlessly. River crossings consumed hours. Some days, the destination visible on the horizon in the morning still looked frustratingly distant by sunset. Distance behaves differently when measured by footsteps. Conversation drifted throughout the day. Merchants exchanged rumors. There's fighting near Samarkand. The northern pass opened early this year. I heard Roman glass sells for 3 times the usual price. They say there's a new ruler collecting taxes farther west. They also say his officials actually count correctly. Everyone laughed. Tax collectors have inspired jokes for thousands of years. By afternoon, heat shimmered above the ground. Dust-coated clothing. Lips cracked. The endless rhythm of footsteps became almost meditative. Clink. Step. Clink. Step. Camel bells. Footsteps. Wind. Silence. Hours blended together. Some travelers sang quietly. Others prayed. Many simply thought. Imagine weeks with almost nothing to distract your mind except the horizon. Perhaps that explains why so many philosophies flourished along the Silk Road. Long journeys leave plenty of time for reflection. Late in the afternoon, someone spotted the next oasis. First came trees. Then birds. Then the unmistakable sparkle of water. Even after dozens of successful journeys, that first glimpse never lost its magic. Water meant life. Shade. Rest. Safety. Or at least relative safety. As the caravan approached, children often ran from the town gates to watch. For them, every arriving caravan carried stories from another world. Exotic clothing. Strange languages. Unusual animals. Sometimes musicians. Sometimes monks. Sometimes diplomats carrying gifts from emperors whose names sounded almost mythical. The arrival transformed the town. Innkeepers smiled. Stable owners prepared empty stalls. Blacksmiths sharpened tools. Merchants displayed their finest goods. Bakers needed extra dough. Business had arrived. Caravanserais stood waiting. These enormous roadside inns became one of the greatest inventions of long-distance trade. Imagine a fortress designed not primarily for soldiers but for exhausted travelers. High walls surrounded spacious courtyards. Heavy wooden gates closed securely at night. Inside, animals rested in sheltered pens. People slept in simple rooms above. Water wells occupied the center. Storage areas protected valuable cargo. Workshops repaired broken equipment. Small kitchens served hot meals. For one evening, strangers from half a dozen civilizations became neighbors. After sunset, something extraordinary happened. Trade slowed. Stories began. Around fires and shared tables, merchants compared journeys. A Chinese trader described snow-covered passes beyond Dunhuang. A Persian explained the bustling markets of Ctesiphon. An Indian sailor spoke of monsoon winds carrying ships across warm oceans. A Greek physician demonstrated unfamiliar medicines. A Buddhist monk recited teachings carried from distant monasteries. Nobody realized it. But knowledge traveled more efficiently than silk. Ideas weighed nothing. They required no camel, no wagon, no customs tax. Only conversation. One curious listener became two. Two became 10. Generations later, entire civilizations changed because someone stayed awake just a little longer beside a caravan fire. Not every evening felt peaceful. Occasionally another caravan arrived carrying grim news. Bandits had attacked farther east. Disease spread through one oasis. An earthquake destroyed a mountain village. A king had died. Borders closed. Routes shifted overnight. Every traveler listened carefully. Tomorrow's decisions depended upon tonight's rumors. Sometimes the rumors proved false. Sometimes they saved hundreds of lives. As darkness settled fully over the caravanserai, the sounds slowly quieted. Camels chewed contentedly. Horses shifted in their stalls. The last conversations faded into whispers. Above the courtyard stretched the same stars watched by shepherds in Mongolia, sailors in India, farmers in China, and senators in Rome. Different civilizations. One sky. Tomorrow, the caravan would rise before dawn once more. The bells would ring again. Another stretch of desert waited. Another mountain pass. Another bargain. Another story. Step by patient step, these ordinary people were stitching together continents. They probably believed they were simply earning a living. History would remember them for something much greater. The Taklamakan, the desert that wanted to be left alone. There are places on Earth that seem almost designed to test human determination. The open ocean. The high Himalayas. The frozen heart of Siberia. And then, there is the Taklamakan Desert. Even its silence feels ancient. Imagine standing alone at sunrise upon a dune taller than a cathedral. No roads. No villages. No trees bending gently in the breeze. Only waves of sand stretching toward every horizon, rising and falling like an ocean suddenly frozen in time. The first rays of morning paint the dunes in shades of amber, copper, and pale gold. For a few brief moments, the desert looks almost welcoming. Beautiful. Peaceful. Almost gentle. Do not be fooled. Nature has always understood the art of first impressions. By noon, the sand will burn through thin leather sandals. By midnight, frost may glitter across the same ground. The Taklamakan possesses very little interest in human comfort. It has had millions of years to perfect its indifference. Its name has inspired endless debate among historians and linguists. Many travelers repeated an old saying that translated roughly as, "Enter, and you may never return." Whether that was the original meaning hardly matters. Anyone who crossed the desert understood exactly why such stories survived. It was a place where mistakes rarely received second chances. The Taklamakan occupies the enormous Tarim Basin of western China. To the north rise the Tian Shan Mountains. To the south stand the Kunlun Mountains. To the west loom the mighty Pamirs. Together they form a colossal stone bowl, trapping one of the driest landscapes on Earth. Rain clouds almost never make it inside. The surrounding mountains steal the moisture long before it reaches the basin. The result is a desert that seems to exist outside ordinary weather. Some parts receive barely an inch of rain in an entire year. Sometimes less. And yet, it was here that one of history's greatest trade networks somehow found a way through. Not across. Around. That distinction mattered enormously. Wise caravan leaders did not challenge the heart of the Taklamakan. Only fools, the desperate, or the hopelessly lost attempted such crossings. Most never became famous. Because they never came back to tell anyone. Instead, caravans hugged the desert's edges like cautious sailors following a dangerous coastline. Along the northern and southern rims, snowmelt from distant mountains fed rivers that disappeared into the sand. Where those rivers reached the basin, life blossomed. Tiny green islands appeared against endless yellow. Poplar trees. Fields of barley. Orchards heavy with apricots and peaches. Small villages slowly growing into bustling oasis cities. Without these rivers, there would have been no Silk Road. Without the Silk Road, history would have looked remarkably different. The oasis towns became beads on an invisible necklace, each separated by days of exhausting travel, each representing survival. To leave one oasis meant accepting uncertainty. Would the next well still contain water? Would a sandstorm erase the trail? Would the caravan arrive before supplies ran out? Every departure required faith. Not blind faith. Calculated faith. There is a difference. Experienced caravan leaders became experts at reading landscapes almost invisible to outsiders. A slight change in wind direction. The color of distant hills. The flight of birds. The appearance of certain desert shrubs. Even insects occasionally revealed hidden moisture nearby. Nature quietly whispered clues. Those willing to listen usually lived longer. The newcomers often learned these lessons rather dramatically. Imagine joining your very first caravan. Perhaps you are 18 years old. Strong. Confident. Convinced that old guides worry too much. The desert quickly corrects such optimism. You suggest a shortcut across open dunes. The older caravan master slowly looks toward you. Then toward the endless sea of sand. Then back again. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. The silence itself becomes the answer. Some wisdom cannot be explained. It must simply be respected. The desert changes constantly. Wind reshapes dunes overnight. A trail visible yesterday disappears by morning. Imagine trying to follow footprints across a beach while waves erase every step behind you. The Taklamakan behaves much the same way. Only with sand. Lots and lots of sand. This meant that navigation depended upon memory far more than visible roads. Guides memorized distant mountain peaks. Recognized unusual rock formations. Studied the stars each evening. During clear nights, the heavens became their map. The North Star offered reassurance. Familiar constellations slowly wheeled overhead. For thousands of years, travelers across Eurasia looked upward when the ground became uncertain. It is comforting somehow. Human beings separated by continents trusted the same stars. Sometimes, however, even the stars disappeared. Sandstorms arrived with astonishing speed. One moment the horizon stretched endlessly beneath bright blue skies. The next, a brown wall appeared in the distance. Growing larger. Closer. Faster. Someone shouted. The caravan immediately stopped. There was no outrunning a sandstorm. Trying usually made matters worse. Camels were forced to kneel, their loads secured tightly. People wrapped cloth around their faces. Eyes narrowed against flying grit. Then the storm arrived. The wind roared like an approaching waterfall. Sand struck exposed skin with surprising force. Tiny grains became countless little needles. Visibility vanished almost instantly. The world shrank to a few feet. Beyond that, nothing. No horizon. No direction. Only swirling dust. Breathing became difficult. Talking became pointless. Everyone waited. Sometimes for minutes. Sometimes for hours. Imagine listening to that endless roar while wondering whether your caravan remained together. Whether your camels still knelt nearby. Whether the next gust might bury your supplies beneath fresh dunes. The desert enjoyed reminding travelers who truly held authority. Eventually, every storm ended. The wind softened. Dust slowly settled. The sun reappeared. And the landscape looked entirely different. Entire dunes had shifted. Small hills disappeared. New ones emerged. The caravan stood up, counted people, counted animals, adjusted cargo, and continued walking. There was no alternative. Stopping permanently was simply another way of dying. Water remained the greatest concern. Every drop received careful attention. Leather water skins hung from saddles like precious treasure. Children were taught never to waste even a mouthful. Adults followed the same rule. A spilled cup of water produced far greater alarm than spilled wine. Wine entertained. Water sustained life. Camels, of course, possess remarkable advantages. Contrary to popular myth, they do not store water in their humps. Those humps contain fat. Nature's portable pantry. When food became scarce, the camel slowly consumed its own stored energy. It was an elegant solution, though perhaps slightly less magical than childhood stories suggested. Still, camels could survive dehydration that would kill almost any other pack animal. They tolerated heat, cold, long distances, poor food, bad tempers from merchants. It is difficult not to admire them, even if they occasionally express that admiration by attempting to bite someone. Camels have always believed mutual respect should include personal boundaries. As days passed, the desert began affecting the mind. Modern psychologists recognize this phenomenon easily. Monotony changes perception. Imagine walking 10 hours every day through nearly identical scenery. The same sand. The same wind. The same distant mountains. Time itself begins to blur. Morning blends into afternoon. Yesterday feels strangely similar to tomorrow. Some travelers became deeply reflective. Others grew restless. Many simply fell into a quiet rhythm of walking and thinking. Perhaps this explains why so many travelers return from the Silk Road with stories that sounded almost mystical. Not because the desert contained magic. Because prolonged solitude changes people. When distractions disappear, thoughts grow louder. A merchant might begin remembering childhood conversations he had not considered in 20 years. A monk quietly repeated sacred verses until each word became part of his breathing. An old caravan master mentally rehearsed every dangerous path still lying ahead. Silence became another traveling companion. Occasionally, the desert offered astonishing beauty. After rare winter snowfalls, white drifts settled gently upon golden dunes. The contrast looked almost impossible. Elsewhere, spring floods briefly awakened carpets of tiny desert flowers. For a few precious days, patches of purple and yellow blossoms appeared where endless sand had ruled for centuries. Nature whispered, I was never entirely asleep. Then the flowers vanished once more. Sunsets over the Taklamakan became legendary. The sinking sun transformed the dunes into flowing rivers of bronze. Long shadows stretched across the basin. The air cooled. The bells of distant camels echoed softly through the evening stillness. Some travelers later wrote that these evenings almost made them forget the hardships. Almost. Then night arrived. The temperature dropped rapidly. Campfires flickered against immense darkness. Above, the stars appeared so numerous that the sky itself seemed made of light. No city smoke obscured them. No electric lights dimmed their brilliance. The Milky Way arched overhead like a glowing bridge connecting east and west. Perhaps somewhere beyond those stars, history looked very small indeed. Around the fire, voices remained quiet. The day's exhaustion settled into every movement. Someone checked tomorrow's water supply. Another repaired a torn saddle. A cook stirred a simple pot of lentils and barley. Nothing extravagant. Food tasted better after 20 miles of walking. Everything does. The oldest guide pointed toward a barely visible cluster of stars low on the horizon. Tomorrow, he said softly. We reached Khotan. A few smiles appeared. Khotan. One of the richest oasis kingdoms on the southern Silk Road. A place of jade, silk, orchards, music, and markets crowded with merchants from half the known world. For weary travelers, the name itself sounded almost like a promise. Warm bread. Fresh fruit. Flowing water. Soft beds. Perhaps even a bath, if fortune proved unusually generous. The caravan settled into sleep. Camels grumbled one final time before folding themselves into the sand. The fire slowly collapsed into glowing embers. The desert grew silent once again. It had watched countless caravans come and go. Some succeeded. Some vanished forever beneath shifting dunes. The Taklamakan remembered them all. Tomorrow, as dawn painted the eastern sky in pale gold, another line of travelers would rise, tighten their packs, listen for the familiar ringing of camel bells, and continue toward the oasis kingdoms that had become the beating heart of the Silk Road. There, amid fertile valleys surrounded by one of the harshest deserts on earth, civilizations would meet, not as conquerors, but as traders, storytellers, pilgrims, and curious strangers sharing the same long road. The oasis kingdoms, isles of life in an ocean of sand. If the Silk Road had a heartbeat, it did not echo from the palaces of emperors. It did not thunder from the camps of conquering armies. It pulsed quietly beneath the shade of poplar trees. Beside wells filled with cold mountain water. Inside crowded marketplaces where 20 different languages drifted through the warm afternoon air. The true heart of the Silk Road lived in the oasis kingdoms. Imagine walking for nearly 2 weeks through endless desert. Every morning begins with sand. Every evening ends with sand. The horizon never changes. Your lips are cracked from dry wind. Dust covers your clothes so completely that you have forgotten their original color. Then, one afternoon, something remarkable appears. Not a mirage. Real trees. At first they are only tiny green smudges floating above the shimmering horizon. Someone at the front of the caravan points silently. Nobody cheers. Experienced travelers know better than to celebrate too early. The desert has fooled people before. But hour after hour, the green shapes grow larger. Soon individual branches become visible. Birds circle overhead. Then comes the greatest luxury imaginable. The sound. Flowing water. Not imagined. Not dreamed. Real water tumbling over smooth stones after its long journey from snow-covered mountains hundreds of miles away. Even before reaching the town itself, every traveler begins walking a little faster. The camels somehow sense it too. Their heavy steps become slightly more eager. It is difficult to explain just how precious an oasis felt to someone who had spent 8 days surrounded by nothing but heat and silence. To modern eyes, many oasis kingdoms might appear surprisingly small. Perhaps only a few thousand inhabitants. A handful of streets. Low mud brick walls. Simple homes shaded by fruit trees. Yet in the ancient world, these places were miracles. Nature had performed an astonishing trick. Water from distant glaciers flowed underground through gravel and rock before emerging here, in the middle of one of Earth's harshest deserts. Around that water, life exploded. Fields stretched outward in neat green patterns. Wheat rippled gently beneath the breeze. Barley swayed in golden waves. Orchards overflowed with apricots, peaches, pears, and pomegranates. Grapevines climbed carefully built wooden frames. Vegetable gardens flourished. Children splashed happily in irrigation channels while their parents pretended to be annoyed. Some things truly never change. The first great oasis encountered by many East caravans was Dunhuang. Today it rests quietly on the edge of the Gobi Desert. 2,000 years ago, however, it stood like a magnificent gateway between China and Central Asia. Every traveler moving west eventually passed through its gates. Imagine arriving there after weeks crossing barren landscapes. The walls rise slowly from the dust. Watchtowers overlook the surrounding plain. Flags flutter above wooden gates. Outside the city, hundreds of animals wait patiently while customs officials inspect arriving caravans. Even ancient governments appreciated paperwork. Merchants sigh quietly. Some traditions refuse to disappear. Inside the walls, the streets feel wonderfully alive. Blacksmiths hammer glowing iron. Potters shape wet clay upon spinning wheels. The scent of fresh bread drifts from clay ovens. Tea boils gently in roadside kitchens. Tailors display colorful fabrics. Jewelry glitters beneath the afternoon sun. Every corner reveals something unexpected. A Persian merchant bargaining over jade. An Indian monk purchasing writing supplies. Chinese officials discussing border reports. Nomadic horse traders laughing loudly beside the stables. No single language dominates the marketplace. Instead, conversations overlap endlessly. Chinese, Sogdian, Tocharian, Persian, various Turkic dialects, Prakrit, even occasional Greek, carried eastward after the campaigns of Alexander the Great centuries earlier. To an outsider, the market sounds almost like music. Different voices, different rhythms. Some words impossible to understand. Others instantly recognizable. Money, after all, has always required remarkably little translation. The merchants themselves became masters of communication. Pointing. Drawing pictures in the sand. Using handfuls of coins. Displaying samples of cloth. Smiling when negotiations progressed well. Frowning dramatically when prices seemed outrageous. The performance of bargaining changed very little across civilizations. Everyone expected it. If someone accepted your first offer immediately, you probably wondered what terrible mistake you had just made. Among all the traders who crossed the Silk Road, none earned a greater reputation than the Sogdians. If the Romans ruled roads, and the Chinese produced silk, the Sogdians mastered commerce itself. Their homeland lay around the fertile valleys of Samarkand and Bokhara, where rivers flowing from Central Asian mountains nourished prosperous cities. Generation after generation, Sogdian merchants traveled astonishing distances. Some settled permanently in Chinese cities. Others lived for years in Persia. Still others established trading communities stretching almost from the Mediterranean to the borders of China. Children grew up speaking multiple languages naturally. Contracts were written in one script. Negotiations happened in another. Family letters traveled thousands of miles along caravan routes. Some Sogdian merchants became so trusted that kings relied upon them for diplomatic messages as well as trade. It was difficult to separate merchant from ambassador. Sometimes they were the same person. Unlike conquering armies, merchants generally preferred peaceful neighbors. War interrupted business. Stable governance increased profits. Predictable taxes encouraged investment. Safe roads produced wealth. In a quiet way, commerce often became a force for peace. Not always, but more often than history books sometimes admit. One oasis farther south lay Khotan. Perhaps no city better symbolized the extraordinary blending of cultures that defined the Silk Road. Khotan sat beside rivers flowing down from the Kunlun Mountains. These rivers carried something almost as valuable as silk: jade. Brilliant green jade. For thousands of years, Chinese artisans had treasured this beautiful stone. Confucius himself compared jade to virtue. Emperors wore it. Nobles collected it. Artists carved it into astonishing masterpieces. The finest jade often came from rivers around Khotan. Each spring, when snow melted high in the mountains, local people searched riverbeds for smooth green stones washed downstream. It became dangerous work. Cold water, swift currents, heavy rocks. Yet the rewards could transform entire families. Some individual stones eventually traveled all the way to imperial workshops in China. There, skilled craftsmen spent months carving dragons, ceremonial discs, cups, ornaments, and delicate sculptures. The finished artwork sometimes returned west centuries later through trade. History enjoys circular journeys. Khotan also became famous for another reason. According to one charming legend, China guarded the secret of silk production so carefully that no silkworm eggs were allowed to leave the empire. The punishment for smuggling them could be death. Naturally, someone eventually smuggled them anyway. Because whenever humans create valuable secrets, someone immediately begins wondering how to steal them. The story tells of a Chinese princess sent to marry the king of Khotan. Knowing she would miss the luxurious silk of her homeland, she supposedly hid silkworm eggs and mulberry seeds inside her elaborate hairstyle before crossing the frontier. The guards searched her luggage. They never searched her hair. History repeatedly demonstrates that determined people become wonderfully creative. Whether every detail is true remains uncertain. But sometime during late antiquity, silk production absolutely spread beyond China. No monopoly lasts forever. Farther north stood Turfan, a city where survival depended not merely upon rivers, but engineering. The people of Turfan constructed remarkable underground irrigation systems known today as caravans. Imagine digging narrow tunnels beneath the desert for miles. These tunnels carried cool groundwater from distant foothills while protecting it from evaporation beneath the scorching sun. Hundreds of vertical shafts allowed workers to remove soil during construction and later maintain the channels. Seen from above, the landscape resembles countless tiny dots stretching across the desert. Hidden below lies an invisible river created entirely by human effort. Without these underground waterways, Turfan might never have existed. Water engineering, while admittedly less exciting than sword fights, has quietly shaped civilizations more often than battles ever did. The Oasis kingdoms differed greatly from one another. Some remained independent. Others paid tribute to larger empires. One generation they acknowledged Chinese authority. The next they allied with powerful nomads. Later they recognized Persian influence. Their rulers became experts in diplomacy. When giants argue, small kingdoms learn flexibility. Imagine governing a city positioned between two enormous empires. One ambassador arrives demanding loyalty. A month later another offers better trade terms. 6 months afterward, mounted warriors appear requesting tribute. Choosing correctly becomes something of an art. Many Oasis rulers survived by avoiding permanent commitments whenever possible. Politics along the Silk Road resembled balancing upon a camel during a sandstorm. Possible, but requiring constant adjustments. Religion flourished here as naturally as commerce. Temples dedicated to different faiths often stood surprisingly close together. Buddhist monasteries welcomed weary travelers. Local shrines honored older traditions. Later, Zoroastrian fire temples glowed beside caravan routes. Still later came churches, mosques, and countless smaller places of worship. The Silk Road rarely asked travelers what they believed before allowing them to continue walking. Ideas mixed almost as freely as merchandise. Art changed accordingly. Walk through an oasis market, and you might see Chinese silk embroidered with Persian patterns. Indian gemstones mounted in Roman-style jewelry. Greek artistic influences appearing in Buddhist sculptures. Architecture borrowed ideas from neighboring cultures. Music blended unfamiliar instruments into entirely new sounds. Civilizations were quietly borrowing from one another without always realizing it. Perhaps the greatest gift the Silk Road ever carried was not silk, nor gold, nor spices. It was curiosity. People who had once believed the world ended beyond the next mountain suddenly discovered neighbors they had never imagined. Sometimes those neighbors looked different, prayed differently, spoke differently, ate unfamiliar foods. And yet, they laughed, raised children, complained about taxes, worried about the weather, celebrated weddings, mourned loved ones, bought fresh bread in the morning, sold goods in the afternoon, watched sunsets beneath the same sky. The realization must have been quietly profound. Human beings were far more alike than different. As evenings settled over Khotan, Dunhuang, Turfan, and countless other oasis cities, market stalls slowly closed. Lanterns flickered to life beneath wooden awnings. The smell of roasting lamb drifted through narrow streets. Musicians gathered in shaded courtyards. Merchants counted coins earned during another successful day. Children chased one another beneath rows of poplar trees. Outside the city walls, tomorrow's caravans already rested beneath the stars. Some would continue east toward China, others west toward Persia. Still others south toward India through towering mountain passes. Every road carried another story. Every traveler carried another piece of the world. And somewhere far beyond the western horizon, another empire had begun hearing whispers about an extraordinary fabric unlike anything it had ever seen. A cloth so light it seemed woven from sunlight itself. Its people called it silk. The empire was Rome. And soon, Rome's fascination with this mysterious Eastern luxury would become so intense that senators, merchants, and emperors alike would spend fortunes trying to obtain more of it, without having the slightest idea where it actually came from. Rome dreams of silk, the fabric that traveled farther than its makers. Long before a Roman ever glimpsed the walls of China. Long before a Chinese merchant had the faintest idea where the Mediterranean Sea lay. Something from the east had already begun quietly conquering the west. Not an army. Not a fleet. Not an emperor. A piece of cloth. It is one of history's gentlest invasions. Imagine walking through the crowded streets of Rome sometime during the 1st century AD. The city hums with restless energy. Stone roads echo beneath iron-shod wagon wheels. Vendors shout beneath colorful awnings. The smell of fresh bread mingles with smoke from blacksmiths' forges, roasted chestnuts, fish sauce, olive oil, and the unmistakable perfume of too many people living very close together. Rome was noisy. Wonderfully noisy. Nearly 1 million people crowded into the greatest city the Mediterranean had ever known. Every nation seemed represented. Greeks debated philosophy. Egyptians sold papyrus. Syrian merchants unloaded glassware. North African farmers supplied grain. Spanish mines produced silver. Roman soldiers returned from distant frontiers carrying stories that sounded increasingly unbelievable with every cup of wine. If there was one place where the world's goods naturally gathered, it was Rome. Yet among all these treasures, nothing attracted more attention than silk. Not because it glittered. Not because it smelled exotic. Because it moved. A silk robe seemed almost alive. When worn, it floated around the body like captured sunlight. It reflected light differently from wool or linen. It shimmered. It whispered softly with every movement. To people who had spent their entire lives wearing coarse fabrics woven from plants or sheep wool, the first touch of silk must have felt almost supernatural. Roman writers struggled to describe it. Some called it transparent. Others complained that it was scandalously luxurious. Several moral philosophers became deeply offended, which, in fairness, was one of their favorite hobbies. The Roman writer Seneca complained that silk garments were so thin they barely counted as clothing. According to him, respectable society risked collapsing because wealthy people enjoyed comfortable fabric. History occasionally reminds us that every generation finds something unexpected to worry about. Another Roman author, Pliny the Elder, complained even more loudly. Not because silk existed. Because Romans spent enormous amounts of money buying it. Every year, he argued, vast fortunes flowed eastward in exchange for luxury goods. Gold and silver left the empire. Silk arrived. From an economic perspective, Pliny considered this a terrible bargain. From the perspective of fashionable Roman nobles, it seemed perfectly reasonable. People have always been willing to spend surprising amounts on beautiful clothing. Some habits survive remarkably well across 2,000 years. The truly fascinating part, however, is this. Most Romans had absolutely no idea where silk came from. They knew it arrived from somewhere unimaginably distant. Beyond Persia. Beyond deserts. Beyond kingdoms whose names sounded mysterious. They called its homeland Serica, the land of the Seres. But where exactly was Serica? Opinions varied wildly. Some imagined forests where delicate cloth somehow grew naturally on trees. Others believed people carefully combed silky fibers from unusual plants. A few guessed insects might somehow be involved. None understood the astonishing truth. Every luxurious robe worn by a Roman senator had begun its life inside the tiny cocoon of a silkworm no larger than a thumb. Halfway across the world. The Chinese, meanwhile, had every intention of keeping that secret. For centuries, silk production remained one of the greatest industrial secrets in history. Children learned the process from parents. Families guarded techniques carefully. Government officials supervised production. Imperial workshops produced the finest fabrics. Exporting finished silk? Perfectly acceptable. Exporting silkworm eggs? Absolutely forbidden. Imagine guarding caterpillars with the seriousness normally reserved for royal treasures. Yet economically, it made perfect sense. China possessed something nobody else could produce. Why surrender that advantage? A single bolt of fine silk might pass through dozens of hands before reaching Rome. The Chinese merchants sold it to Central Asian traders. Those traders carried it westward. Persian merchants purchased it. Then Syrian merchants. Finally, Roman traders bought it in Mediterranean markets. At every exchange, the price increased. By the time silk reached Rome, it had become one of the most expensive materials on earth. In modern terms, fine silk announced something very clearly. I have more money than practical judgment. Ancient luxury branding worked remarkably well. Yet silk itself represented only a tiny fraction of what traveled west. The caravans carried lacquerware polished until it reflected faces like mirrors. Beautiful jade carvings. Fine paper, though still rare outside China. Exquisite bronze objects. delicate ceramics, even unfamiliar musical instruments. Each object hinted at a civilization few Romans would ever see. Naturally, curiosity followed. Roman merchants wanted more than silk. They wanted direct access. Imagine eliminating every middleman collecting profit along the journey. The dream sounded wonderfully profitable. Reality proved considerably more complicated. Between Rome and China stretched thousands of miles of mountains, deserts, rival kingdoms, and political uncertainties. No Roman merchant simply decided one morning, "I think I'll ride to China." The journey demanded years. Multiple languages. Several fortunes. Extraordinary luck. And perhaps the patience of a saint. Few attempted it. Most goods continued moving through countless intermediaries. Ironically, this arrangement benefited nearly everyone involved. Persian traders earned commissions. Sogdian merchants prospered. Oasis kingdoms collected taxes. Camel drivers found employment. Innkeepers filled their caravanserais. The Silk Road became an enormous economic chain in which every link depended upon the next. Break 1. The entire system weakened. Back in Rome, silk slowly transformed fashion. At first, only emperors and the wealthiest aristocrats could afford it. Silk robes appeared during lavish banquets illuminated by hundreds of oil lamps. Guests reached out discreetly to touch the astonishing fabric. Conversation inevitably turned toward the mysterious East. Where does it truly come from? How far away is this country? Do people there really harvest cloth from trees? No. My cousin knows a merchant who swears giant spiders weave it. Human imagination has always been wonderfully enthusiastic when reliable information is unavailable. Artists soon incorporated silk into paintings and sculptures. Poets praised its elegance. Tailors experimented with combining silk and linen. Fashion evolved. Demand increased. Whenever something rare becomes fashionable, more people immediately decide they need it. Roman ladies often preferred brightly colored silk dyed deep crimson, royal purple, emerald green, or brilliant saffron. The dyes themselves frequently traveled long distances. Tyrian purple from Phoenicia, indigo from India, madder root from various regions. The Silk Road connected colors as efficiently as it connected cloth. Not everyone approved. Several Roman emperors attempted to regulate luxury spending. Laws occasionally restricted who could wear certain fabrics. Purple remained largely reserved for imperial families. Silk attracted criticism for encouraging extravagance. The regulations worked about as well as similar laws throughout history usually do. People simply found creative ways around them. Human beings possess an extraordinary ability to interpret rules flexibly. While Roman nobles admired silk, Chinese scholars developed surprisingly little interest in Rome itself. To the Han court, Rome occupied the distant western edge of the known world. They called it Decene. Descriptions reaching China portrayed Decene as wealthy, sophisticated, and remarkably civilized. Some Chinese officials even considered Rome a kind of distant mirror image of the Mongol Empire. A great kingdom far beyond deserts and mountains. Rich, organized, powerful, separated only by an inconvenient amount of geography. The two empires almost never met directly. Instead, they observed each other through stories carried by merchants. Imagine trying to understand another civilization entirely through travelers who had themselves only heard second-hand accounts. Details became distorted. Distances exaggerated. Cities grew larger with every retelling. Kings became wiser. Monsters occasionally appeared where ordinary wildlife would have sufficed. Still, the general picture remained surprisingly accurate. Each civilization recognized that another great empire existed somewhere beyond the horizon. Neither fully understood the other. both remained intensely curious. This curiosity inspired remarkable journeys. Roman merchants pushed farther east. Chinese envoys ventured farther west. Persian traders happily connected both. And somewhere between them, oasis cities flourished beyond anything earlier generations could have imagined. The Silk Road had become more than a trade route. It had become a bridge between imaginations. People began dreaming about places they had never seen. Children in Antioch heard stories of snow-covered Chinese mountains. Young scholars in Chang'an learned of Mediterranean seas stretching beyond sight. Maps slowly expanded. Knowledge widened. The world grew larger. Yet prosperity always attracts unwanted attention. Where wealth travels, others soon follow. Bandits watched the roads carefully. Corrupt officials invented creative new taxes. Small wars occasionally blocked important passes. Entire caravans vanished without explanation. The Silk Road promised riches. It also demanded courage. For every merchant who returned home wealthy enough to build a magnificent house, another disappeared forever somewhere between two distant horizons. The roads remained beautiful. The roads remained dangerous. And soon, another kind of traveler would begin walking them, not seeking profit, but wisdom. Monks carrying nothing more valuable than handwritten scrolls would leave India, crossing deserts and mountains to carry a new philosophy into China. Unlike silk, these travelers hoped to give everything away. Their cargo weighed almost nothing. Its influence would last for thousands of years. The monks who carried a new world, when Buddhism traveled the Silk Road. Not every traveler who stepped onto the Silk Road hoped to become wealthy. Some carried no silver, no silk, no spices, no precious stones hidden inside carefully wrapped bundles. Some owned little more than a walking staff, a simple rope, a bamboo, and a collection of handwritten scrolls that represented years of careful study. Their destination was uncertain. Their reward was invisible. And yet, these quiet travelers would transform Asia more profoundly than many conquering armies. History often celebrates those who carried swords. The Silk Road quietly reminds us to remember those who carried books. Imagine an early morning somewhere in northern India during the 1st century AD. Mist hangs low above the fields. The first rays of sunlight illuminate ancient monasteries built from warm sandstone. Monks awaken before dawn. The air is cool. Birdsong fills the gardens. Some sweep stone courtyards. Others quietly recite familiar verses that have echoed through these walls for generations. Breakfast is simple. Rice. Vegetables. Perhaps fruit if the season has been generous. Conversation remains minimal. Silence is not uncomfortable here. It is part of the education. Among the monks sits a young scholar. His teacher has just entrusted him with an extraordinary responsibility. Carry these teachings north. Across mountains. Across deserts. Across kingdoms. Share them with anyone willing to listen. No one can promise he will survive the journey. No one can promise anyone will even understand his language. But the journey begins anyway. Unlike merchants, monks traveled astonishingly light. Every unnecessary possession became another burden to carry over mountain passes. Many walked. Some joined merchant caravans for protection. Others accepted rides on pack animals whenever generous travelers offered assistance. Their pace was slow, deliberate, patient. Perhaps that suited their philosophy perfectly. Buddhism had emerged in India centuries earlier through the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, whose reflections on suffering, compassion, and the search for inner peace gradually spread across the Indian subcontinent. For generations, these teachings moved mostly from teacher to student, monastery to monastery, village to village. Then the Silk Road appeared. Suddenly, Ideas could travel thousands of miles. The roads that merchants had built with commerce became highways of philosophy. The first challenge was language. Imagine carrying a sacred text written in Sanskrit into lands where nobody could read a single character. Translation became essential. But translation is never simply replacing one word with another. Every language carries its own worldview, its own rhythm, its own assumptions. How do you explain enlightenment to someone whose language contains no equivalent word? How do you describe karma without accidentally changing its meaning? Ancient translators wrestled with these questions for centuries. Many became brilliant scholars in several languages. Some spent decades translating only a handful of texts. Their work demanded extraordinary patience. One missing sentence could alter an entire philosophy. Among the first great stopping places for Buddhist travelers was the oasis kingdom of Khotan. The city embraced the new faith with remarkable enthusiasm. Monasteries appeared beside busy markets. Travelers who had spent weeks crossing unforgiving deserts suddenly found quiet gardens where they could rest. Shade. Water. Simple meals. Safety. The monasteries became more than religious centers. They became hospitals, libraries, schools, ghost houses, community centers. If you were an exhausted traveler arriving at sunset after 12 days in the desert, a monastery might feel remarkably close to paradise. The monks asked few questions. They offered food if they had it, water if it was available, a place to sleep. In return, perhaps all they requested was respect. Sometimes a conversation. Sometimes simply silence. The Silk Road slowly became dotted with these peaceful refuges. Between dangerous mountain passes and endless deserts stood islands of contemplation. A curious contrast. Outside the monastery walls, merchants argued energetically over prices. Inside, someone quietly copied ancient manuscripts, one careful brushstroke at a time. One world chased profit. The other sought wisdom. Both needed the road. One of the greatest centers of Buddhist learning eventually emerged at Dunhuang. You may remember Dunhuang as the bustling gateway between China and Central Asia. It soon became something even more remarkable. Just outside the city, artists began carving caves into soft sandstone cliffs. At first they were small, simple meditation chambers. Then generations added more, and more, and more. Eventually nearly 500 decorated caves stretched along the cliff face. Today we call them the Mogao Caves. Walking through them must have felt like entering another universe. Walls covered from floor to ceiling with paintings. Buddhas seated upon lotus flowers. Flying celestial musicians drifting through clouds. Kings. Merchants. Pilgrims. Animals. Entire stories painted in brilliant colors. Blue made from lapis lazuli brought from Afghanistan. Red pigments from distant deserts. Gold leaf catching the flickering light of oil lamps. Everything inside whispered the same message. Someone had traveled very far to create this. The caves became a visual encyclopedia of the Silk Road. Artists borrowed ideas from everywhere. Greek-inspired folks appeared in Buddhist robes. Persian floral patterns surrounded Indian religious scenes. Chinese landscapes framed Central Asian faces. Every generation added something new. Culture itself became collaborative. No emperor ordered this. No committee planned it. It simply happened because people met one another. Sometimes the most beautiful things emerge without anyone intending them. The monks themselves became remarkable travelers. One of the most famous was a Chinese pilgrim named Xian. Centuries after Zhang Qian opened China's western horizons, Xian decided that the Buddhist scriptures available in China were incomplete. He wanted the original texts. There was only one solution. Walk to India. Imagine making that decision over breakfast. I think I'll walk across Asia. Reasonable people might have suggested a shorter hobby. Yet Zhang Qian departed anyway. He crossed deserts where skeletons reportedly marked forgotten trails. He climbed mountains where breathing itself became difficult. He sailed dangerous seas before eventually reaching India. There he studied for years, carefully collecting sacred manuscripts. When he finally returned to China, he brought not gold, but knowledge. His translated texts shaped East Asian Buddhism for centuries. Later came Xuanzang, perhaps the greatest Silk Road pilgrim of them all. During the 7th century, despite official restrictions on leaving China, Xuanzang secretly slipped beyond the frontier under cover of darkness. Already, history seemed determined to make extraordinary journeys slightly illegal. He crossed the Gobi Desert almost alone. He endured thirst so severe that he later wrote of nearly losing consciousness. He climbed snow-covered mountain passes. He debated philosophers in India's greatest universities. He spent nearly 17 years traveling before finally returning home. His caravan carried more than 600 Buddhist manuscripts, along with statues, relics, notes, maps, memories. His journey later inspired one of China's greatest literary classics, Journey to the West. Reality had become legend. The spread of Buddhism transformed Chinese culture gradually. Quietly. Almost gently. Monasteries appeared across the empire. Artists developed entirely new styles. Stone cave temples spread through northern China. Wooden pagodas rose above forests. Scholars debated Indian philosophy alongside Confucian teachings and Taoist traditions. The Silk Road had not merely transported religion. It had introduced new ways of asking life's oldest questions. What causes suffering? How should we live? Can inner peace exist in a chaotic world? Questions that remain surprisingly modern. Even emperors became interested. Several Chinese rulers supported Buddhist monasteries generously. Others worried that the religion's growing influence threatened traditional authority. History enjoys repeating its pattern. New ideas arrive. Some welcome them. Others become nervous. Occasionally, everyone argues for several centuries. Eventually, society adjusts. The Silk Road also carried Buddhism beyond China. Into Korea. Into Japan. Into Vietnam. Each culture adapted the teachings in unique ways. The philosophy changed slightly as it traveled. Not because anyone intended to alter it. Because every civilization naturally interprets ideas through its own traditions. A teaching born beneath Indian trees eventually found new expression among Japanese mountains. History's longest conversations often begin with one traveler taking the first step. Of course, Buddhism was not the only faith moving along the Silk Road. Zoroastrian priests carried sacred fire traditions west and east. Jewish communities established trading settlements. Nestorian Christian missionaries crossed Central Asia centuries before many Europeans realized such journeys were even possible. Later still, Islam would sweep across these same roads, reshaping commerce, scholarship, architecture, and politics from Spain to Western China. The Silk Road belonged to no single religion. It welcomed anyone willing to endure its hardships. That openness became one of its greatest strengths. Ideas competed peacefully more often than armies did. Around countless evening campfires, merchants discussed business while monks discussed enlightenment. Sometimes they discussed both. Imagine a Persian trader asking a Buddhist monk about the nature of happiness while simultaneously negotiating the price of silk. Human beings have always been wonderfully capable of mixing practical concerns with profound ones. As another evening settled over the caravan route, the monastery bells ring softly across an oasis valley. Travelers pause. Some enter to pray. Others simply enjoy the quiet art gardens before continuing their journey. Candles flicker inside painted halls. Brushes scratch gently across fresh parchment as monks continue copying sacred texts. Outside, the camel bells begin ringing again. The caravan is moving. The road never truly sleeps. And farther to the east, another empire is entering an age so prosperous, so confident, so brilliantly cosmopolitan that later generations would remember it as one of the greatest golden ages in human history. It is the age of the Tang Dynasty, when the Silk Road will reach a level of prosperity and cultural exchange unlike anything the world has ever seen. The Tang Dynasty, when the Silk Road reached its golden age. There are rare moments in history when everything seems to align. Peace lasts just long enough. Governments remain stable just long enough. Trade flourishes just long enough. Artists find inspiration. Scholars exchange ideas. Merchants grow wealthy. Travel becomes, if not easy, then at least possible. For the Silk Road, that moment arrived during the Tang Dynasty. If the earlier centuries had built the road, the Tang transformed it into the busiest highway on earth. Imagine approaching the Chinese capital of Chang'an during the 8th century. After weeks across mountains and deserts, the city first appears as a dark line against the eastern horizon. Then, gradually, walls emerge. Not ordinary walls. Walls so immense they seem to belong to an entire kingdom rather than a single city. Nearly 6 miles from east to west. More than 5 miles from north to south. Massive gates guarded by watchtowers. Wide avenues stretching with astonishing precision toward the imperial palace. To a traveler arriving from the scattered oasis kingdoms, Chang'an must have looked almost impossible. Not because it was beautiful, although it certainly was. Because it was organized. Everything appeared planned. Measured. Balanced. The city did not simply grow. It had been designed. By the 8th century, Chang'an was likely the largest city in the world. More than 1 million people lived within its walls and surrounding districts. Imagine that number. 1 million voices. 1 million stories. 1 million ordinary lives quietly unfolding beneath the rooftops. While much of Europe still consisted of comparatively small towns and villages, Chang'an was a metropolis that astonished nearly every visitor. Its streets were astonishingly broad. Some avenues stretched nearly 500 feet across. Wide enough for enormous processions, merchant caravans, government officials, musicians, soldiers, wandering monks, curious children, and the occasional stubborn camel refusing to cooperate. History rarely records the camel's opinion. One suspects it remained deeply unimpressed. The city followed a strict rhythm. Large drums sounded at dawn. The gates opened. Markets awakened. Officials hurried toward government offices carrying bundles of bamboo documents. Shopkeepers swept dust from doorways. Tea sellers lit charcoal stoves. The smell of steamed buns drifted into the cool morning air. By sunset, drums echoed again. The gates closed. Anyone arriving too late remained outside until morning. Ancient cities valued punctuality rather more seriously than modern airports. At the heart of Chang'an stood the imperial palace. Golden roofs shimmered beneath the sunlight. Gardens surrounded elegant halls. Artificial lakes reflected willow trees swaying gently in the breeze. Here the Tang emperors ruled one of history's most sophisticated states. Yet even they understood something important. Their prosperity depended upon roads stretching thousands of miles beyond the palace walls. The Silk Road did not merely enrich China. It helped define it. Perhaps nowhere on earth had it demonstrated the Silk Road's cultural exchange than Chang'an's western market. Imagine entering through enormous wooden gates just after sunrise. The marketplace spreads before you like another city within the city. Thousands of stalls. Rows upon rows of merchants. Silk hanging from wooden beams. Glass vessels sparkling in morning light. Spices stacked in colorful pyramids. Fresh fruit arriving from distant valleys. Books. Perfumes. Medicines. Jewelry. Carpets. Musical instruments. Every direction offers another wonder. The sounds become almost overwhelming. Chinese spoken beside Persian. Arabic mixing with Sogdian. Turkic dialects blending into Sanskrit. Laughter. Arguments. Negotiations. Children running between crowded stalls while parents pretend not to notice. Somewhere nearby, a storyteller gathers an audience. A musician tunes a strange instrument brought from Central Asia. A doctor advertises miraculous remedies capable of curing nearly everything. Ancient advertising has always possessed tremendous confidence. Whether the medicine worked remained another question entirely. Visitors from distant lands wandered the streets openly. Persian merchants established prosperous communities. Sogdian trading families built elegant homes. Indian monks translated sacred scriptures. Korean scholars studied Chinese literature. Japanese envoys carefully observed everything they could. Arab travelers described the city's astonishing wealth. For perhaps the first time in history, people from nearly every corner of Eurasia shared the same urban space. Imagine eating breakfast beside someone from Samarkand. Discussing philosophy with a monk from India before lunch. Buying glassware crafted in Syria during the afternoon. Watching musicians from Central Asia perform at sunset. The Tang capital became humanity's greatest meeting place. Its restaurants reflected this remarkable diversity. Noodles flavored with spices from India. Flatbreads inspired by Persian baking. Milk products favored by nomadic peoples. Dates from western oases. Pomegranates. Pistachios. Walnuts. Grapes. Many foods now considered traditionally Chinese first arrived through these western trade routes. Even chairs became fashionable partly because of foreign influence. Earlier generations had often sat on mats. Gradually, furniture styles evolved. History occasionally changes through surprisingly ordinary objects. Imagine introducing the chair to someone who has spent generations sitting on the floor. Daily life quietly transforms. Fashion changed as well. Ladies at the Tang court admired flowing robes inspired partly by Central Asian styles. Foreign hats became fashionable. Boots designed for horseback riding gained popularity. Musicians performed melodies borrowed from distant kingdoms. Dancers learned routines originating thousands of miles away. One of the dynasty's greatest rulers, Emperor Xuanzong, adored foreign music so deeply that his court became famous for elaborate international performances. Art no longer belonged to one culture. It belonged to everyone willing to appreciate beauty. Meanwhile, the caravans continued arriving. The western gates of Chang'an rarely rested. Camel after camel entered beneath towering walls. Their loads carefully recorded by government officials. Silk departed westward. Horses arrived from Fergana. Glass from Persia. Silver vessels from Sasanian craftsmen. Ivory from Africa. Amber from the Baltic. Pearls from the Indian Ocean. Frankincense from Arabia. Every shipment represented months of dangerous travel. Sometimes years. Merchants arriving safely often paused before entering the city. Not merely from exhaustion. From relief. Many had crossed deserts where water disappeared for days. Mountain passes where snow buried entire trails. Kingdoms where political fortunes shifted overnight. To stand beneath Chang'an's walls meant survival. Success. Another story worth telling. The Tang government understood that prosperous trade required secure roads. Military garrisons protected important frontier regions. Watchtowers signaled danger across long distances using smoke by day and fire by night. Officials maintained postal stations where government messengers changed horses with remarkable efficiency. Caravanserais expanded. Bridges received repairs. Even wells became strategic investments. An empire could not tax merchants who never arrived. Security became good economics. Not every traveler entering Chang'an sought profit. Diplomatic missions arrived carrying extraordinary gifts. One embassy might present magnificent horses. Another exotic birds unknown in China. Still another offered finely crafted weapons, rare gems, or unusual plants. The imperial court responded with ceremonies of breathtaking grandeur. Musicians filled palace halls. Silken banners fluttered overhead. Officials wearing brilliantly colored robes greeted foreign ambassadors according to carefully prescribed rituals. Every gesture carried symbolic meaning. Respect. Status. Friendship. Power. Politics has always appreciated good theater. The Tang era also became a golden age of poetry. Perhaps no civilization has ever produced so many extraordinary poets within such a relatively short period. Li Bai wandered mountains imagining moonlit rivers. Du Fu reflected upon war, friendship, aging, and ordinary human sorrow. Wang Wei combined Buddhist tranquility with breathtaking landscape imagery. Many poets had traveled parts of the Silk Road themselves. Others listened carefully to merchants' stories. Their verses captured the loneliness of distant frontiers, the beauty of desert sunsets, the melancholy of farewell, the excitement of new horizons. Sometimes history survives more vividly in poetry than in official records. One famous image appears again and again in Tang literature. A lonely frontier outpost. Evening approaching. Camel bells echoing across the desert. Smoke rising from a distant watchtower. Somewhere beyond the horizon. Another caravan slowly making its way home. Yet beneath all this prosperity, small cracks had begun appearing. They were easy to ignore at first. Trade remained strong. Markets stayed crowded. The empire looked invincible. History often appears strongest shortly before unexpected change. Frontier generals accumulated increasing military power. Political rivalries deepened within the court. Tax burdens slowly increased. Far beyond China's borders, new empires rose. Others collapsed. The Silk Road depended upon stability across thousands of miles. Maintaining that stability forever proved impossible. In 755 AD, one ambitious general named Lu Shan launched a rebellion that shook the Tang Dynasty to its foundations. Cities burned. Millions died. Trade routes fractured. The Golden Age did not vanish overnight. But it would never again shine with quite the same brilliance. Still, the Silk Road endured. Because roads are remarkably patient. Empires rise. Empires fall. Kings come and go. Merchants simply asked one practical question. Can we still get through? As long as the answer remained yes, even cautiously, even slowly, the caravans continued to move. Step by step. Bell by bell. Across deserts, through mountains, beyond kingdoms. Connecting a world that had begun to realize it was no longer made of isolated civilizations, but of neighbors. The Empire of the Horse, how the Mongols connected the Silk Road like never before. If the Tang Dynasty gave the Silk Road its golden age, the Mongols gave it something stranger. They gave it speed. For centuries, merchants had crossed Asia knowing that every few hundred miles the rules might change. A new king. A different tax. Another language. Perhaps another war. Every border meant uncertainty. Every frontier demanded patience. Then, during the 13th century, something extraordinary happened. Many of those borders simply disappeared. Not because the kingdoms agreed peacefully, because they had all been conquered by the same empire. Imagine standing on the endless grasslands of Mongolia around the year 1200. The wind never seems to stop. It rolls across the plains like invisible waves. The sky feels impossibly large. There are no forests to block your view. No mountains hiding the horizon. Only grass stretching farther than the eye can follow. This landscape creates a particular kind of people. Life here rewards movement. Not permanent cities. Families travel with their herds. Children learn to ride horses almost before they can walk. Food depends upon animals. Weather decides everything. A harsh winter can destroy years of careful work. A dry summer threatens entire communities. The steppe teaches resilience. It also teaches adaptability. Among these nomadic tribes grew a boy named Temujin. History would remember him by another name: Genghis Khan. Few individuals have changed the map of the world so dramatically. His early life offered little hint of future greatness. His father was poisoned. His family abandoned. There were days when survival itself seemed uncertain. Young Temujin hunted small animals simply to avoid starvation. He learned quickly that trust was precious. That loyalty mattered. That weakness invited danger. The steppe became his teacher. It was not a gentle one. Over the years, Temujin united rival Mongol tribes through diplomacy, alliances, marriages, and, when necessary, overwhelming force. It was an astonishing achievement. For generations, the tribes had fought one another. Now they rode together. In 1206, the assembled leaders proclaimed him Genghis Khan, universal ruler. The title sounded ambitious. History would quietly respond, "You have no idea." Within a generation, Mongol armies exploded outward in every direction. North into Siberia, east into northern China, west across Central Asia, south toward Persia, then farther still, Russia, the Caucasus, Eastern Europe. The speed astonished contemporaries. Entire kingdoms vanished almost before neighboring rulers understood what had happened. Cities that resisted often suffered terrible destruction. The Mongols believed fear itself could become a weapon. If one city's fate convinced 10 others to surrender peacefully, fewer battles became necessary. It was brutal, terrifying, and from a military perspective, frighteningly effective. The Silk Road initially suffered. War always interrupts commerce. Merchants avoided battlefields. Caravans waited anxiously while kingdoms collapsed around them. Roads became dangerous. Markets emptied. People wondered whether centuries of trade had finally reached their end. Then something unexpected happened. Once the conquest slowed, peace arrived. Not perfect peace, but enough. Historians call this period the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace. The phrase sounds almost contradictory, yet it captures an extraordinary reality. One empire now controlled enormous stretches of Eurasia, from Korea nearly to Hungary, from the frozen forests of Siberia to the deserts of Persia. Never before had so much of the Silk Road belonged to a single political authority. Imagine traveling from China toward the Black Sea. Instead of crossing dozens of hostile frontiers, you often remained inside the same empire. Different governors, different local customs, but ultimately one ruling power, one legal system, one network of official messengers, one military protecting the major routes. For merchants, this changed everything. The Mongols understood trade. Many had begun life as nomads exchanging horses, livestock, leather, and wool across enormous distances. Commerce was familiar, profitable. Useful. They realized that prosperous merchants paid taxes. Burned caravans did not. So roads received protection. Bandits faced severe punishment. Government-issued passports called Pesa allowed approved travelers to move surprisingly freely through Mongol territory. Official relay stations throughout the empire. Fresh horses waited at regular intervals. Messengers could travel astonishing distances with remarkable speed. Some reports crossed thousands of miles in only weeks. For the 13th century, it was astonishingly efficient. Imagine arriving exhausted at a relay station after riding all day. Your horse is tired. You are tired. An official greets you, checks your credentials, provides food, fresh mounts, perhaps a warm place to sleep. Tomorrow you continue. The empire keeps moving. Information begins traveling faster than ever before. And information, like water, has a habit of reshaping everything it touches. One of the greatest beneficiaries was an Italian merchant family from Venice. The Polos. Among them traveled a young man whose name would become almost synonymous with the Silk Road. Marco Polo. When Marco was still a teenager, his father and uncle invited him to accompany them east. Not merely to Constantinople. Not merely to Persia. All the way to China. It sounded almost unbelievable. Most Europeans considered such distances nearly unimaginable. Marco accepted. Perhaps he possessed remarkable courage. Perhaps youthful curiosity. Possibly both. The journey took years. Across Armenia, Persia, the Pamir Mountains, deserts, oases, the vast plains of Central Asia. Eventually, China. There Marco entered the service of Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan and ruler of the Yuan dynasty. Kublai fascinated foreign visitors. Unlike many conquerors, he admired learning. He welcomed scholars, engineers, astronomers, doctors, administrators. Talent mattered more than birthplace. Marco later described astonishing cities with paved streets, canals, paper money, bustling markets, and government systems unfamiliar to European readers. Some people refused to believe him. Paper money? Impossible. Coal burned as fuel? Surely not. Cities larger than anything in Europe? Exaggeration. History occasionally punishes imagination by turning truth into fantasy. Centuries later, archaeologists and historians confirmed many of Marco's observations. Reality had simply been more extraordinary than his readers expected. The Silk Road now carried astonishing variety. Chinese porcelain reached Persian palaces. Persian astronomy influenced Chinese scholars. European craftsmen admired Eastern textiles. Gunpowder knowledge slowly traveled westward. Printing techniques spread. Navigation improved. Mathematics evolved. Medicine borrowed ideas from multiple civilizations. The roads had become arteries through which knowledge itself flowed. Yet every advantage carried hidden risks. The safer the roads became, the easier everything traveled, including things nobody wanted. Merchants carried spices. They also carried fleas. Pilgrims carried sacred books. They also carried invisible bacteria. Ships transported silk. They also transported rats. The Silk Road had never merely connected markets. It connected ecosystems. During the 1340s, somewhere in Central Asia, perhaps near trading settlements around the Black Sea or farther east, a deadly disease began moving along these same trade networks. People noticed fever, pain, swollen lymph nodes, then death. Quickly. Terrifyingly quickly. The disease traveled with merchants who never intended to spread it. No one understood bacteria. No one knew about infected fleas living upon rats. To medieval observers, the plague seemed almost supernatural. Healthy people became gravely ill within days. Entire households vanished. Caravans unknowingly carried infection from one oasis to another. Ships carried it across seas. Roads that had once delivered unimaginable prosperity now delivered unimaginable tragedy. Historians would later call it the Black Death. Within a few years, millions across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe were dead. Entire villages disappeared. Markets fell silent. Fields lay abandoned. The Silk Road did not cause the plague, but it allowed the disease to travel farther and faster than earlier epidemics ever could. The same network that connected humanity's greatest achievements also revealed humanity's greatest vulnerability. Connection is powerful. It is never selective. It carries hope and hardship together. As the plague swept across continents, the Mongol Empire itself began to fracture. Successors argued. Regional rulers grew independent. The great unified empire slowly broke apart into separate khanates. Trade continued, but the remarkable security of the Pax Mongolica gradually faded. Merchants once again encountered more borders, more taxes, more uncertainty. Still, the Silk Road refused to disappear. It had survived nomadic invasions, dynastic collapse, political revolutions, deserts, blizzards, bandits, even plague. For nearly 1500 years, it adapted again and again. But another challenge was quietly approaching from beyond the horizon. It did not ride horses. It floated on the sea. European sailors, searching for direct routes to Asia, were preparing to leave familiar coastlines behind. Soon, great wooden ships would begin crossing vast oceans. And for the first time in history, the world's attention would slowly shift away from the ancient caravan trails toward the endless blue highways of the sea. The age of the camel was beginning to yield to the age of the sail. When the sea replaced the sand, the long twilight of the Silk Road. History rarely ends with a single dramatic moment. Empires do. Battles do. Kings certainly do. But roads are different. They do not suddenly disappear. They fade. Quietly. Patiently. Almost politely. The Silk Road did not wake up one morning and discover it had become obsolete. Instead, year after year, caravan after caravan, the world slowly began looking toward another horizon. The sea. Imagine standing on the docks of Venice in the late 15th century. The harbor never truly sleeps. Wooden ships sway gently against weathered piers. Sailors shout to one another across the water. Ropes creak. Seagulls circle overhead, always optimistic that someone will accidentally drop lunch. The smell is unmistakable. Salt. Tar. Fish. Smoke. Spices. The scent of thousands of journeys beginning and ending. Venice had grown wealthy from trade with the East. Silk still arrived. Pepper still arrived. Porcelain still arrived. But Venetian merchants understood something frustrating. Every shipment had already passed through countless middlemen. Arab traders. Persian merchants. Central Asian caravans. Oasis kingdoms. Taxes. Fees. Profits. By the time a bale of silk reached Europe, its price had multiplied many times over. Naturally, European rulers began asking a dangerous question. What if we could reach Asia ourselves? Questions like that have a habit of changing history. Across the Iberian Peninsula, two ambitious kingdoms, Portugal and Spain, had begun investing heavily in ships. Not ordinary fishing boats. Ocean-going vessels capable of surviving weeks or months at sea. They were experimenting with better sails, improved navigation, more accurate maps, magnetic compasses, astrolabes. Everything that might help sailors venture farther into water that terrified earlier generations. To medieval Europeans, the Atlantic Ocean still felt mysterious. Not because they believed monsters definitely lived there, though some maps certainly suggested they might, but because so few people truly knew what waited beyond the horizon. The unknown has always been humanity's greatest invitation and greatest fear. In Portugal, Prince Henry later remembered as Henry the Navigator, though he spent remarkably little time personally navigating, encouraged generations of explorers to sail far down the west coast of Africa. Year after year, captains pushed a little farther. One dangerous cape after another. Each voyage added another piece to the map. Not because they were simply curious, though curiosity certainly helped. They were looking for a sea route to Asia, a way around the long caravan roads, a shortcut to the spices, silk, porcelain, and riches of the East. It sounded wonderfully simple. It absolutely was not. Ships disappeared. Storms shattered wooden hulls. Scurvy quietly weakened crews. Fresh water spoiled. Food rotted. Mutinies erupted. Sailors spent months staring at endless water, wondering whether they would ever see land again. The ocean has always demanded its own kind of courage. Then, in 1488, Bartholomew Dias rounded the southern tip of Africa. For the first time, Europeans knew the Indian Ocean could be reached by sea. The route remained unimaginably long, but it existed. 10 years later, Vasco da Gama completed the journey to India. When his ships finally reached Calicut on India's western coast in 1498, the world quietly shifted. No trumpets announced the change. No ancient caravan bells suddenly fell silent. But something fundamental had happened. Europe could now reach Asia without crossing Central Asia. The ancient highway had found a powerful rival. Around the same time, another sailor decided the Earth might offer an even bolder shortcut. Rather than sailing around Africa, he would sail west. His calculations were deeply optimistic. His geography somewhat flawed. His confidence, however, was extraordinary. His name was Christopher Columbus. He never reached China. Instead, he stumbled upon continents unknown to Europeans. History occasionally rewards mistakes more generously than careful planning. Suddenly, global trade expanded beyond anything earlier civilizations had imagined. The Atlantic joined the Indian Ocean. The Pacific would soon follow. The Silk Road no longer connected the edges of the known world. The world itself had become much larger. Back in Central Asia, the old caravan routes remained active. For a while. Camels still crossed deserts. Merchants still bargained in Samarkand. Caravanserais still welcomed exhausted travelers. But fewer caravans arrived each year. Imagine owning a roadside inn that had served merchants for generations. Your grandfather remembered caravans stretching beyond the horizon. Your father welcomed hundreds of travelers every season. Now, only a few dozen arrive. The courtyard feels strangely quiet. The stable has empty stalls. The kitchen prepares fewer meals. No disaster has occurred. No war has destroyed the road. The traffic has simply gone elsewhere. The great oasis cities noticed the change. Some adapted. Others struggled. Markets that once overflowed with foreign merchants became increasingly local. Languages disappeared from busy streets. Children who once grew up hearing Persian, Chinese, Arabic, Turkic, and Sogdian now heard mostly their neighbors. Cosmopolitan life slowly became provincial. It happened gradually enough that many scarcely noticed. One generation simply accepted a quieter city than the one their grandparents had known. Political changes accelerated the transformation. The rise of the Ottoman Empire reshaped trade between Europe and Asia. Powerful new states emerged across Central Asia. The once unified Mongol world had long since fragmented. Safe passage became less predictable. Taxes increased. Wars occasionally interrupted ancient routes. Merchants, being practical people, naturally preferred whichever path offered fewer risks. Increasingly, that path lay across the sea. Ships possessed another advantage: capacity. Imagine loading a camel. Perhaps it carries 400 pounds comfortably. Now imagine a large sailing vessel. It carries hundreds of tons. Thousands of times more cargo. Silk. Pepper. Tea. Porcelain. Cotton. Timber. Metal. Entire warehouses floated across oceans. Economics rarely ignores such differences. Ocean voyages remained dangerous. Storms still claimed ships. Pirates remained enthusiastic entrepreneurs. But once maritime technology improved, sea trade simply became cheaper for many goods. Not faster at first. Often not safer. But more efficient. Commerce tends to follow efficiency with remarkable loyalty. The camel, faithful servant of the Silk Road for nearly 2,000 years, gradually surrendered its position to the ship. One cannot help feeling a little sentimental about that. Imagine an old caravan master nearing retirement. He has crossed the Taklamakan Desert 30 times. He knows every well, every dangerous pass, every trustworthy innkeeper. He has spent his entire life listening to the gentle rhythm of camel bells. Now younger merchants speak excitedly about giant ships leaving Lisbon, about sea routes, about fortunes waiting across oceans. Perhaps he smiles quietly. Perhaps he shakes his head. Perhaps he wonders whether anyone will miss the old roads once they are gone. History rarely pauses to comfort those left behind. Yet the Silk Road never truly vanished. Pilgrims continued traveling. Diplomats still crossed Central Asia. Scholars sought ancient monasteries. Nomads followed familiar migration routes. Local trade flourished. Only the grand international caravans became less common. The road had changed purpose. It became quieter. Not dead. Simply older. Like an elderly storyteller who no longer commands crowded halls but still remembers every tale. Meanwhile, the cities themselves preserved echoes of their extraordinary past. In Samarkand, blue hotel domes still shimmered beneath the Central Asian sun. In Bokhara, ancient madrasas continued educating scholars. In Kashgar, traders still gathered where roads from China, India, and Persia met. In Dunhuang, monks continued protecting priceless manuscripts inside hidden caves. The Silk Road had left fingerprints everywhere. Architecture, languages, music, food, religion, art. Even after the caravans grew fewer, the ideas they had carried remained. A bowl of noodles, a melody played on a foreign instrument, a story borrowed from another culture, a spice added to a familiar recipe. Civilizations remembered one another in countless small ways. Perhaps that is the true measure of history. Not monuments, not battles, not empires, but the ordinary habits people no longer realize came from somewhere else. The world had become permanently interconnected. It would never return to isolation. Ironically, the very success of the Silk Road had prepared humanity for its own transformation. By teaching civilizations to trade, to communicate, to trust distant strangers, it had made global exploration possible. The sea did not destroy the Silk Road. In many ways, it inherited its mission. The highway simply changed from sand to water. The destination remained the same. Connection. As the centuries passed, winds slowly buried forgotten caravan trails beneath fresh dunes. Wooden caravanserais crumbled into quiet ruins. Watchtowers stood empty against enormous skies. Only the desert remembered every traveler who had passed. The bells no longer rang every morning. The great camel trains became stories told by grandparents. Children listened with wide eyes. Really? They walked all the way to China? Across those mountains? Through that desert? The old storyteller smiled. Yes. They really did. And somewhere beneath the drifting sands, the ancient road waited patiently. Not entirely gone. Only sleeping. Because history has an odd habit. Sometimes, the oldest roads find new travelers. The road that never truly ended, rediscovering the Silk Road. If you travel the old Silk Road today, you will not find endless caravans stretching across the horizon. You will not hear thousands of camel bells greeting the sunrise. You will not arrive at bustling caravanserais filled with Persian merchants arguing fiercely over the price of silk, while Buddhist monks quietly copy manuscripts in the corner. At least, not anymore. Instead, you find something quieter. Something almost haunting. Ruins. Half-buried cities. Ancient watchtowers standing alone against enormous skies. Broken walls slowly returning to the earth that once supported them. The Silk Road has become a landscape of echoes. And somehow, that makes it even more beautiful. Imagine standing outside the old city of Merv, deep in modern-day Turkmenistan. 2,000 years ago, this was one of the largest cities on earth. Caravans from every direction entered its gates. Its markets overflowed with silk, spices, horses, books, glass, perfumes, and languages from half the known world. Now, the wind moves quietly across empty streets. Grass grows where merchants once argued. Birds nest inside crumbling walls. The silence feels almost impossible. History has a peculiar way of swallowing noise. The louder a city once was, the stranger its silence becomes. Walk through the ruins long enough, and your imagination begins doing the rest. Perhaps that pile of weathered bricks once supported a merchant's home. Perhaps that collapsed arch sheltered travelers escaping a winter storm. Perhaps children once laughed exactly where you now stand. The people are gone. The stories remain. Farther east lies Samarkand. Unlike Merv, Samarkand never entirely disappeared. It simply kept changing. Generation after generation rebuilt the city. New rulers added magnificent mosques. Astronomers built observatories. Artisans covered buildings with brilliant blue tiles that still shimmer beneath the Central Asian sun. Stand in Registan Square at sunset. The crowds slowly thin. The day's heat begins fading. Golden light reflects turquoise dome until the buildings almost seem to glow from within. For a moment, it becomes surprisingly easy to imagine another century. Another caravan arriving. Another merchant staring upward in quiet amazement. Some places refuse to forget who they once were. Then there is Bokhara. For more than 2,000 years, people have lived here continuously. Empires came. Empires left. Trade flourished. Trade declined. The city simply carried on. Its narrow streets still wind between ancient buildings. The smell of fresh bread drifts from neighborhood bakeries each morning. Craftsmen still hammer copper into intricate bowls. Children still chase one another through shaded courtyards. Life continues. History, after all, is rarely about endings. Mostly, it is about continuity. Perhaps nowhere captures the spirit of the Silk Road more powerfully than Dunhuang. Remember the monastery caves carved into sandstone cliffs, The ones where generations of monks painted walls covered with Buddhas, kings, musicians, merchants, mountains, rivers, and stars? They still exist. For centuries, one extraordinary secret remained hidden. Around the year 1000, someone sealed a small side chamber inside the cave complex. No one knows exactly why. Perhaps to protect precious manuscripts during troubled times. Perhaps because the room had simply become too full. Whatever the reason, the door remained closed. For nearly 900 years. Imagine that. An entire library sleeping quietly behind a wall while kingdoms rose and fell outside. Then, in 1900, a Taoist caretaker named Wan Yuanlu noticed something unusual. Behind a damaged section of plaster, a hidden doorway. Inside lay one of archaeology's greatest discoveries. More than 40,000 manuscripts, paintings, prayer flags, documents, letters, maps, receipts, contracts, songs, poems, medical texts, calendars, languages from across Asia, some written on paper, others on silk. Together they formed an astonishing time capsule of Silk Road life. Imagine opening a room where nobody has entered for almost a millennium. The air itself seems filled with forgotten voices. Among those manuscripts appeared something remarkable. The world's oldest complete printed book with a known date. The Diamond Sutra, printed in 868 AD. Centuries before Gutenberg's printing press transformed from Europe, printers in China were already producing beautifully printed religious texts using carved wooden blocks. The Silk Road had preserved not merely stories. It had preserved technological history itself. Elsewhere, archaeologists uncovered cities swallowed by sand. One by one, forgotten settlements emerged from beneath the desert. At Naya, explorers found abandoned houses where wooden furniture still stood after 1,500 years. Dry desert air had preserved ordinary objects with astonishing clarity. Sandals, combs, children's toys, writing brushes, pieces of clothing. Imagine finding a child's shoe untouched for over 1,000 years. History suddenly feels wonderfully personal. Not kings, not generals, just a family living ordinary lives before the desert quietly reclaimed their home. The Taklamakan had become an accidental museum. Modern archaeology changed our understanding of the Silk Road completely. Earlier historians often imagined civilizations developing separately. China over here, Rome over there, India somewhere in between. The Silk Road revealed something far more interesting. No civilization had ever been entirely isolated. Glass discovered in Chinese tombs originated in the Mediterranean. Roman coins appeared in Central Asian markets. Indian ivory reached imperial Chinese workshops. Persian silver cups inspired Chinese metalworkers. Ideas moved constantly. Sometimes slowly. Sometimes unexpectedly. But always persistently. Scientists joined the story as well. DNA studies revealed astonishing mixtures of ancestry across Central Asia. Skeletons buried thousands of years ago carried genetic connections stretching across enormous distances. People had been meeting, marrying, moving, and building families long before anyone invented passports. The Silk Road connected bloodlines as thoroughly as it connected markets. Even food tells the story. Think about something as ordinary as noodles. Did they travel west from China? East from the Middle East? Did multiple civilizations invent similar foods independently? Historians still debate the details. But one thing remains certain. Recipes traveled. Ingredients traveled. Cooking techniques traveled. The Silk Road changed dinner as much as diplomacy. Tea reached Central Asia. Grapes reached China. Peaches traveled westward. Walnuts spread across continents. Sugar slowly transformed cuisines. Imagine explaining to an ancient merchant that one day billions of people would begin every morning with beverages and foods made possible by exchanges along his trade route. He might simply shrug. Then ask whether anyone planned to buy his silk. Practical people rarely worry about posterity. The 20th and 21st centuries brought another surprising development. The Silk Road returned. Not exactly as before. No endless camel caravans. No imperial envoys carrying jade gifts. Instead, railroads, highways, cargo trains stretching nearly long, shipping containers stacked like colorful building blocks, fiber optic cables buried beneath deserts, airplanes crossing the same skies once watched by hawks following ancient caravans. The routes changed. The purpose remained familiar. Connection. Today, freight trains leave cities in eastern China carrying electronics, machinery, clothing, and manufactured goods. Weeks later, they arrive in Europe. The journey follows corridors remarkably close to sections of the ancient Silk Road. Modern engines replaced camels. Steel rails replaced dusty trails. Yet the geography feels strangely familiar. Mountains still guide movement. Deserts still demand respect. Oasis cities still occupy strategic locations. Some historians smile knowingly. The road was never gone. Humanity simply upgraded the transportation. Even the phrase, Silk Road, has taken on new meanings. Computer scientists speak of digital highways connecting continents. Economists discuss global supply chains stretching across oceans and mountains. Diplomats speak of international cooperation linking East and West. Without realizing it, we continue using the language of an ancient caravan trail. Perhaps because the underlying idea has never changed. People are curious. They always have been. Curious about distant lands, foreign foods, strange beliefs, beautiful fabrics, unknown inventions, interesting neighbors. Curiosity built the Silk Road. Not conquest alone. Not commerce alone. Curiosity. One person asking another, "What lies beyond those mountains?" Then deciding to find out. As evening settles once more over the deserts of Central Asia, the ancient road grows quiet. The dunes glow bronze beneath the setting sun. A cool wind sips through abandoned watchtowers. Somewhere in the distance, a lone camel walks slowly across the horizon. Not leading 1,000 merchants. Just one traveler. The scene feels timeless. If you listen carefully, almost carefully enough, you might imagine hearing bells carried by the wind. Not real bells. Memory. The sound belongs to everyone who ever walked this road. Merchants dreaming of fortune. Monks searching for wisdom. Children leaving home for the first time. Diplomats carrying fragile peace. Camel drivers humming softly beneath endless stars. Ordinary people. Extraordinary journeys. The Silk Road never belonged to emperors. They merely claimed it. It belonged to those who walked it. And in a curious way, we still do. Every message sent across continents. Every package arriving from another country. Every recipe borrowed from another culture. Every book translated into another language. Every friendship formed across distant borders. Each carries the quiet spirit of that ancient highway. The road still connects the world. Only now, it runs through all of us. And so, as the last light disappears beyond the dunes, the desert grows still once again. The wind smooths away today's footprints, just as it erased those of countless travelers before us. Somewhere beneath those shifting sands lie forgotten campsites, broken pottery, rusted horseshoes, faded letters, and the tiny fragments of ordinary lives that quietly changed the course of history. Empires came believing they would last forever. Merchants came hoping to earn enough for another journey. Pilgrims came searching for truth. Most never imagined that thousands of years later, strangers from distant futures would still remember the road they walked. Perhaps that is the Silk Road's greatest lesson. Civilizations are not built only by kings or conquerors. They are built by conversations, by shared meals, by exchanged ideas, by the courage to walk towards someone who speaks a different language and ask, with genuine curiosity, "Who are you?" For nearly 2,000 years, that question echoed across deserts, mountains, rivers, and endless skies. And because people kept asking it, the world became smaller, richer, kinder, more connected. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, imagine those old caravan bells ringing softly beneath a sky filled with stars. Imagine a single line of camels disappearing into the moonlit dunes. Their journey is long. Their pace is slow. There is no hurry. There never was. The road stretches onward beyond the horizon, disappearing into darkness, just as it always has. And somewhere, far ahead, another oasis waits patiently beneath the stars. And may your dreams follow the oldest road in the world.